Bro, this story has one of the most twisted power systems I've ever seen in an isekai because this guy gets crippled by his own brother. And then a video game gives him a monster body that grows by eating everyone else's. Look at how crazy this gets. Everyone else lobs into Worldfall and spawns as a normal player with a character screen. He spawns as the game's joke monster, a runt drake the size of a big dog, dull gray, wings too small to fly. Then he eats his first kill and a glowing line pops up. Part absorbed. 1. But here's the disgusting part. He logs out and his little finger moves. For the first time in a year. Every part his monster absorbs in the game, his real paralyzed body heals a piece out here. And trust me, the counter does not stop. By the end of this thing, he's absorbed 41 parts. The monster is the size of a barn, and he's stepping out of his wheelchair in front of the entire world. Anyway, forget all that. Let's get into it. This guy used to be rich. Built a whole company from nothing. Then a truck ran him over. And bro, it wasn't even a random truck. Normally the truck sends you to another world. His truck was paid for. By his own adopted brother, Crawford. Last time he lived this year, he found everything out too late. Crawford paid the driver. Crawford killed their parents. Crawford took the company, his dreams, even the girl he was about to propose to. And with a boot on his head, Crawford confessed every word of it, right before he died. Then he opens his eyes 1 year in the past. Hospital bed, legs still dead, every memory intact. And this time, he knows the one thing nobody else on Earth knows yet. Worldfall launches this week. And in 30 days, the whole world learns that whatever your body earns inside the game bleeds into your real body outside it. The doctors told him no amount of money fixes his spine. They're right. Prosthetics don't heal. The game heals. To 100%. Oh. And in exactly 30 days, Crawford marries this guy's sister Haiti to lock down the last of the company. Same day, the merge goes public. Same day, every account on the planet freezes. So when Crawford rolls a top-of-the-line gaming rig into his room, anything to keep the cripple quiet, he smiles, says thank you twice. And the second the door clicks shut, he tells his lawyer to liquidate everything he still owns into game currency. His brother thinks he bought him a toy. He just funded his own funeral. Spencer put the helmet on at 11 at night in a chair he couldn't get out of. Everyone else who logged into Worldfall got a character screen first. Sliders. Face, height, class. Spencer got dirt. The world loaded from the ground up. Wet leaves. Gray light coming down through a canopy. He went to lift a hand and shade his eyes, and a claw came up instead. 4 toes. Dull gray scales. A hooked black nail on the end of each one. He looked down the rest of himself. A body about the size of a big dog. 2 wings folded flat on his back, stubby and leathery. Not enough wing there to lift a cat. Text hung in the air in front of his face. Prop C RE Runt Drake. Level 1 TS. No venom, no flight. The game hadn't given him a player with a monster skin. It had given him the monster. He'd been handed it. And then the second thing landed, and it landed a lot harder. He was standing. Not propped. Not strapped. Standing, on 4 legs that answered him. He shifted his weight and the weight went where he sent it. For a year his legs had been furniture. Things nurses turned. Things his brother looked at in the doorway and then didn't look at. He took a step. The ground pushed back. He took 4 more and something came loose and then Spencer was running. Roots, mud, a fallen log he cleared without deciding to. And his legs burned. And the burn was the best thing that had happened to him in 12 months. Because burn means the wire is connected. He stopped at the top of a rise and roared and it came out cracked and small and stupid and he didn't care. Which is exactly how 5 players found him. They came up the slope in starter gear, already splitting what a Runt Drake horn sells for. Spencer bit the first one who swung. Par damage. Par cess. 4. Their leader laughed at the number out loud. So Spencer ran and let them chase. He took them straight down into the root hollow because the root hollow is where the grown ones sleep. 11 adult drakes came up out of the dark. The party lasted about 9 seconds. Whoever lands the last hit owns the corpse. So Spencer stayed low at the wall while their leader burned a big drake down to nothing, then stepped in and put his teeth through its throat. A drake first kill. Part absorbed, 1 mun. He ate the leg. Not the loot, not the drop, the actual leg, muscle, and bone. Eating a part doesn't give him experience, or a buff that expires. It gives him the part, welded into his own body, kept forever. Parts, 1-9. His jaw thickened. That was all. An inch of new bone across the hinge, and a bite that went from 4 damage to 9. 20 minutes later, he heard someone crying, and the crying was not a monster. 6 players in matching guild tabards had a girl backed against a rock face at low health, farming her armor off her one hit at a time, telling her to kneel and ask nicely. The girl was Poppy. The promo streamer Worldfall had paid to be on camera all launch. 60,000 people were watching it happen. Spencer came out of the tree line at a dead sprint and took the nearest one off his feet. 8-9 damage. 9 damage S critical. 8 teams. He killed that one in 3 bites. The guild turned and swung and got nothing worth talking about, because none of them had built for a monster that hit back. He went through the middle of them and their leader last, and he left 6 name tags graying out on the grass. Poppy hadn't moved. Her stream hadn't cut. 60,000 people watched a knee-high gray lizard sit down in front of their host with someone else's tabard still in its teeth. She got up on one elbow and said thank you to the little gray drake. Spencer said she should go. This area wasn't safe. Poppy screamed. Not fear. The other thing. She grabbed the camera angle with both hands and told 60,000 people that the runt drake talked. That it had just wiped a full griefing squad off her. That whoever this was had saved the entire launch stream and she owed him. Her chat lost its mind. 60,000 went to 71,000 while she was still lying on the ground. She was the promo streamer under contract penalty clause, not allowed to log out, and the contract had just paid off for somebody who wasn't her. The clip was up in 4 minutes and had 200,000 views before Spencer finished looting the bodies. He did finish. He had run those 5 players into the hollow on purpose that afternoon, limping, cutting left, staying just close enough to keep 5 greedy people committed, and the hollow had done the rest. 6 sets of guild gear on the grass here, 5 sets of starter gear back in the mud of the hollow, and 1 runt drake with no bags and no hands, carrying all of it out a mouthful at a time. He'd been on this side of a video game his whole adult life, so he knew what day one prices do. Nobody has anything. Everybody wants everything, and the first gear on the board sets its own number. He listed the lot that night and watched the coins come in from players who had been alive 4 hours longer than the armor they were buying. He walked out of his first session worth more than most of the server. Bro, every other player in Worldfall climbs a bar that gets slower the higher it goes. Spencer climbs by eating, and the things he eats only get bigger. There was no cap on it that he could find. No decay, no expiry, no respec, no level requirements standing between him and a part. One meal had nearly doubled his bite. 40-something creature lines were sitting on that map, and every one of them was bigger than the last thing he'd swallowed. Worldfall's forums already had a name for the runt drake, the joke class, the bottom rung, the mob you kill 4 of before lunch. Nobody could pick it. Nobody had ever wanted to. 2 hours into his first session, and the thing the whole server was arguing about wasn't a top-ranked swordsman. It was a knee-high gray lizard that talked. And the top comment under it, the one that stuck, the one every forum thread copied for the next month, was somebody guessing wrong, some hidden monster class, unlockable, day 1 exclusive, has to be. Nobody guessed a paralyzed man in a chair. Spencer read that comment and let them keep it. A wrong answer everybody agrees on is the best armor money can't buy. The 6 he had killed were not guessing anything. They came back at the respawn stone with a name in their kill log that wasn't in any bestiary, and before morning their guild had a bounty open on a level 1 runt drake, price going up every hour, no takers yet. Then he sat in the dark under the roots with a counter glowing in the corner of his eye and did the math he came here to do. 1 part, 40-something lines to go, 30 days until the whole planet found out what he already knew. Eat, evolve, walk, then take back everything. He logged out. The ceiling of his room came back. The rails on the bed. The chair parked where the nurse always parked it, angled at the door so he'd see whoever came in. He was flat on his back with his brother's money cooling on his forehead in the shape of a helmet and legs that hadn't reported in since the truck. He lay there a second, the way you do. Then, down at his left side, under the blanket, his little finger twitched. The finger went again at 6 in the morning. Spencer lay in the dark and asked for it, and it answered. Left hand, little finger, 1 slow drag across the sheet. Then a second one, when he asked again. He didn't call a doctor. He called his lawyer. The lawyer told him the first batch had cleared overnight and asked, carefully, whether he wanted to reconsider. Spencer told him to keep going and hung up. Then he got the helmet back on and found out the night had already made him money without him. The auction board was empty. All of it had sold while he slept. 6 sets of guild gear off the 6 he'd left graying on the grass. 5 sets of starter kit out of the mud of the hollow. 1 runt drake horn, listed at 400 coins because that's what a joke monster's horn goes for, bought inside 2 minutes by somebody who will never know he purchased it from the drake. Tess. Auction settled, 31,600 coins. Worldfall let you cash out that first week. The exchange opened at 100 coins to the dollar. Spencer pushed the whole balance through and watched his phone on the tray beside the bed. $316 landed in an account with his name on it. From a video game. At 7 in the morning. While his legs did nothing at all. Coins came out of the game as real money. Which meant real money went in as coins, and the thing his lawyer was doing to his estate was not a gamble anymore. It was a trade. He put the phone face down and went hunting. The horn off his first kill of the morning went on the board at 400, same as yesterday's. He closed the window and turned to leave. Porn. Sold. 400 coins. The window came back before he'd taken 3 steps. Somebody had been sitting on the listing page waiting for it. Down in the root hollow, the 6 he'd killed were not done with him. Their guild had a bounty posted on an unnamed level 1 runt drake. 2,000 coins at midnight, 9,000 by lunch, climbing every time nobody collected. 4 takers came for it that morning in matched blue kit. They found him in the shallow end of the hollow, which was the mistake. Spencer let them see him, backed off the way something small backs off, and pulled all 4 down the slope into the dark where 11 grown drakes sleep. He took the first one's knee out from under him. The noise brought the roof down on the other 3. It was over in about 40 seconds. Their own kill feed did the talking. 4 names, one after another, killed by runt drake. He stripped all 4 and put the gear straight back on the board under the same seller. The bounty went to 14,000 by dinner. Nobody had figured out yet that raising it was just paying him more to keep doing this. Poppy bought 3 of those sets herself. She said so on stream, holding up a blue chest plate that had been on a corpse that morning, and then she went looking for the man selling half the server its armor. She opened the regional player list. Nothing. She ran the seller through the ranked ladder, 1.2 million names on launch week, and got nothing again. Because the ladder only counts players. Beasts don't rank. As far as Worldfall's leaderboards were concerned, he was scenery. 94,000 people watched her work that out live. Poppy said the seller wasn't a player, and wasn't a guild, and wasn't an alt. She said it was the little gray thing that talked to her yesterday, the one that took 6 people off her back, and if the game refused to give it a rank, then chat could give it a name instead. She called it the mongrel. The thing that isn't any one breed. She said it like an insult, the way you'd name a stray. Then she said the stray had saved her launch stream and was currently the best-dressed creature on the server, and she thanked it again on camera, by that name, in front of 94,000 people. Chat took it in about 4 seconds. It was on the listing threads inside an hour, on the bounty poster by evening, and by that night people were typing it like it had always been the creature's name. Spencer had no name field to change. He just stopped correcting anyone. He kept it. And here's what the name did to his afternoon. Poppy had also told her chat in the same breath, the practical thing, 4 million people were stuck shoulder to shoulder in the beginner zone, and the fastest way out of it was gear you didn't have to farm for. Buy armor, clear the zone, stop queuing behind strangers for the same 3 boars. So they bought armor. And the only armor on the board in any quantity was his. Every listing with mongrel drop in the title moved instantly. A starter chest plate that went for 80 coins on day 1 was going for 900 that afternoon. Same armor, same stats. Worth 11 times more because it was faster than farming and because a streamer's audience wanted a souvenir off the monster. He sold 214,000 coins of loot in 6 hours and never once undercut anybody. Trust me, the coins were the small half. At launch, the exchange sat at 100 coins to the dollar. By that evening, with 4 million people trying to buy their way out of the beginner zone, it sat at 61. Every dollar his lawyer had converted the day before was worth better than $1.50 now, and his lawyer had converted a great deal more than dollars. The whole server was building the currency he'd already bought. Now put Spencer down for a second, because his brother is logging in for the first time, and you want to see how he does it. Crawford doesn't make a character and go kill rabbits. He buys a level 14 account off a broker before the servers are 8 hours old. He hires a crew to play it overnight in shifts so it never stops earning. He buys the 5th rank guild outright, the whole roster, contracts, and all, and files a new charter over it in gold trim. Goldspire. He doesn't cheat. That's the thing to understand about him. Every coin of it is inside the rules, run through people whose job is knowing where the rules stop, paid for with money that has his dead parents' signatures somewhere under it. Night 2, Goldspire sits 7th on the player board. Crawford is climbing the same ladder as everybody else, faster than anybody else, and the one creature outselling his entire guild isn't on that board at all. Right, back to the Drake. The forest adders lived a ridge over, and Spencer had been eating them since noon. One bite didn't do anything. That's the rule he'd worked out on day 1 and confirmed on day 2. A single kill gives him a part, but a trait needs the whole line. He had to eat enough of a creature for the game to admit that was what he was now. Parsed adder. 12 sturdy H, 30. 20 minutes in, he had a pile. Skinny gray ones out of the leaf litter, fat ones sunning on the rocks, one under every third stone on the ridge. An hour in, a big one in a hollow log got a fang through his shoulder. That cost him half his health and 40 minutes lying still in the ferns while it wore off, which told him exactly what he was farming for. He went back to it as soon as he could stand. Pre-E Forest Adder, 30 E3 E1. Line threshold met AG part absorbed. 2. His jaw came unhinged and reset wider. 2 fangs slid down out of the roof of his mouth, thin and curved and wet, and folded back when he shut it. Then the rest of him caught up. Scales darkened along the spine, legs lengthened. He went from the size of a big dog to the size of a pony in about 9 seconds, and the wings on his back stayed exactly as useless as they had been that morning. Parts 2W. No glands, no spitting. The fangs carried what an adder's fangs carry, 1 dose at a time, refilling slow. It was enough. He tried it on a tusked hog, 2 levels above him. 240 health, the kind of thing that used to take him 10 minutes and most of his blood. He bit it once for 14 damage, which was already better than the 9 he woke up with, and then he walked beside it. Poisoned, 3 CCP. CPE. He didn't fight it, he escorted it. The hog charged twice, missed twice, slowed, knelt, and died 60 seconds later with a pony-sized gray drake sitting on its haunches watching the number tick down. 2 players filming from the ridge got all of it. The clip went up titled "The Mongrel Just Grew," and the top reply was somebody insisting that no monster in this game evolves. That they'd read the whole bestiary, that this was not a listed form. They were right, nothing listed in that book does. Spencer logged out at midnight with the counter still glowing behind his eyes. The ceiling, the rails. The tray the nurse leaves across the bed, and on it, a plastic cup of water she puts there every night because she has to. Yesterday he could have knocked it over. He closed his whole left hand around it. Thumb and 4 fingers, a grip, the cup lifting clear of the tray without a wobble. He drank half of it. He set it back down on the tray, upright, and it stayed there. 2 parts in the game. 2 pieces of him back out here. His phone was still lying face down where he'd left it, so he turned it over, and the top notification wasn't the bank. It was the server board. New guild charter, filed and posted, gold trim, first week fee paid in full. Gold spire. His brother had just paid to put his name on something, again, and the countdown in Spencer's head moved 1 number. 26 days. The quarry was 2 ridges past the adders, and Spencer smelled it before he saw it. It stood at the bottom of a flooded stone pit. Twice the height of a man, gray, with slabs of bone grown over its shoulders like stacked paving stones. It didn't patrol, it didn't wander. It stood in the water and breathed, which is how a game tells you a thing is not for you yet. 10 more elites stood around the rim, facing outward, the way guards stand. He bit it once from behind, just to see. CH14 damage. 9,000 health. That's 640 bites with 10 escorts coming down the slope at bite 3. He got out of the pit with a flank hanging open and a very simple problem. The best thing on the map, and he could not beat it alone. Players solved this by bringing 40 friends. Spencer had no friends and no friends list because Worldfall still filed him as scenery. So he went through his own menu instead. And this is the part nobody on the server had ever seen because nobody else on the server was a monster. Pack bond. Available by. Players get parties, beasts get packs. The rules were 3 lines long, fight it alone, beat it without killing it, and it has to be weaker than you. Then it follows you. If it dies, it comes back in 8 hours, and it keeps whatever you handed it. Nobody had ever read those lines because you had to be inside a monster to be shown them. There was 1 slot. Opening the second and third cost 60,000 coins together, which is a number that would have ended the idea for anybody else on day 4. Spencer had sold 214,000 coins of armor the day before. He bought both slots before he closed the menu. Then he took 3 that afternoon. A burrower out of the fern country, blind, flat, all shoulders and digging claws. A tusked hog, same breed as the one he'd walked to death the day before. And a long-legged runner off the ridge that he had to chase for 6 minutes before it agreed to be beaten. Then he did the thing that made it work. He stopped listing the blue guild kit. 4 sets of it were still sitting in his inventory waiting for the auction board, and instead of selling them, he strapped them on to 3 animals. Plate on the hog. Bracers on the burrower's dig claws. Everything light on the runner. The hog went from 240 health to 1100. A scout on the quarry rim filmed the whole thing on the way past. Gray drake the size of a pony, sitting on its haunches, and 3 woodland animals in stolen human armor standing in a line in front of it, waiting. Poppy played that clip at the top of her stream and had to stop twice. She told 130,000 people that the little gray thing that had saved her on launch night had spent day 4 building a war party out of hogs, and that as far as anyone could tell, the mongrel was recruiting. Chat wanted to know how. Poppy said the honest thing, which was that no player had that button. The clip did 900,000 views before dinner. Bro, that's when the server started being scared of him instead of curious about him. The quarry took 11 minutes. The burrower went in under the waterline and came up beneath the escorts, which put 4 of them in the pit with their backs to Spencer. The runner took the far side and simply refused to be caught, and every elite that chased it was an elite not standing next to the big one. The hog held the ramp. Spencer bit the ogre 80 times. Tasks, 14 damages time, poisoned, 3 sex edge bursts. The poison was the whole trick. 9,000 health is nothing when 3 of it drains every second for as long as the fight lasts, and the fight lasted because his animals kept it lasting. The ogre went down in the water with its own escort, still trying to get past the hog. He ate the shoulders first. 8, last hit, mongrel byred part absorbed. 3. Bone came up through the hide over his own shoulders in flat overlapping plates, warm, ugly, permanent. The escort that had been hitting him for 40 a swing went down to 11. His minions got the loot. He got the body. That was the arrangement from then on. Then he moved them into the spider tunnels, and the counter started running without him. Tunnel spider, 12 to 200s, because that was the other rule he'd worked out. 1 kill is a part. A trait is a whole line, and a line means every one of them the game can find. 200 tunnel spiders. Dog-sized, pale, hanging in sheets off the ceiling of a limestone hole that ran back into the ridge further than his eyes went. First hour, 41. His animals learned the ceiling before he did. By dark, 90. The hog wouldn't fit past the second chamber and stood in the entrance killing everything that tried to leave. Then he logged out, ate dinner one-handed in a hospital bed, and slept 8 hours. Tunnel spider, 176, 200 Ps. That was the number waiting for him when he put the helmet back on. Nobody had touched a key. 3 animals in stolen armor had worked the tunnel all night, the way a farm works whether or not the farmer is awake, and the burrower had opened a second entrance while it was down there. Trust me, that is the moment the whole thing stopped being one drake with a bite. 24 more, and the tunnel was empty. Tunnel spider, 200 and 200 marge/hold, line threshold. Met marge/ a part absorbed. 4 marge parts, 4 margin parts. 2 sacks came up under his jaw, black, the size of fists, and sat there where anyone could see them. The fangs he'd taken from the adders thickened and hollowed out. Scales rolled down over the shoulder plates in long overlapping bands, belly plate wide, snake cut, and the whole animal stretched. Pony to workhorse in under a minute. Serpent down the spine, drake at the head, half of each, and hiding neither. The wings on his back stayed exactly as useless as they had been on day 1. Poisoned. 9 cc, sech p. 3 a second had been 1 dose at a time out of a fang, refilling slow. 9 a second came out of glands that made more while he used it, on every bite, on anything with a throat. He tested it on the elites still respawning at the quarry and stopped bothering to fight them. He bit them once and walked away. Out here in the dark, he closed his hand around the plastic cup without checking first whether it would work. Now, the bounty. Nobody had ever collected the 14,000 coins the Griefer Guild put on him. What happened instead was that the guild sitting first on the player board bought the whole contract off them, because 14,000 coins was pocket change to a roster of 900, and they wanted the quarry. Not Goldspire. Goldspire was 7th and busy filing paperwork. The first place guild had watched the same clips as everyone else and reached a reasonable conclusion. There was an unranked, unlisted, ridiculously overgrown creature squatting on the best elite spawn on the continent. It had never once appeared on a leaderboard, and therefore it was an area boss the developers had hidden in the patch. Area bosses drop first kill titles. So they brought 40 players, 4 healers, and a streamer. Poppy was the streamer. 310,000 people were watching her ride along at the back of her raid formation when the thing came up out of the flooded pit. Somebody near the front called it undertuned. Somebody else said the name was funny and that it would be a short fight. Their opening volley put 9 damage on him, total, all 40. He had 2,400 health and bone over his shoulders. The first tank took a bite for 38 and then stood there watching his own bar drain 9 a second while his healer's cast bar could not keep up with it. He died in 4 seconds with a full health healer standing next to him. That's the part chat could not get past. The healer never stopped casting and the tank died anyway. Then the burrower came up under the healers. It lasted 110 seconds. 40 players, the top guild on the server, wiped in a stone pit by 1 creature and 3 woodland animals in secondhand guild armor. Live, on a stream with 310,000 people on it. Poppy didn't run. She turned her camera and kept it there and said the name out loud twice. Once when it came up out of the water, and once when it was over, and the last of the raid was graying on the ramp. The mongrel, not a hidden boss. Not a dev asset. The same thing that had thanked nobody and asked for nothing on launch night 4 days bigger. 40 death notices scrolled up her chat with the same killer's name on every line, and by midnight that name was on the front page of every forum Worldfall had. The server had been calling him a joke for 4 days. It stopped. His animal stripped the ramp while the chat was still scrolling. 40 raids sets off the best equipped roster in the game straight onto the board under the same seller, at whatever he felt like asking. 24 days. He logged out at 1:30 and lay there with his phone on his chest, and the notification that came in wasn't the bank and wasn't the auction board. It was the patch notes. Version 1.043, 17 lines long, mostly numbers. A nerf to starter zone respawn rates, a fix for a door in the capital, a thing about mount audio. Line 14 sat under miscellaneous with no explanation attached. Physical feedback improvements. 4 million people scrolled past it looking for whether their class got nerfed. One person in a hospital bed read it 3 times and knew exactly which 2 bodies the developers had just admitted were talking to each other. He left a spider tunnel to his animals and took the ridge himself. The Snake Ridge sat 2 days east of the quarry, a spine of gray rock standing above the tree line, and the reason no player farmed it had nothing to do with the snakes. The ridge breathed. 20 damage a second to anything with lungs, everywhere on the rock, all day, no way to turn it off. Spencer had 2 black sacks under his jaw. He walked up it like a footpath. Prests. Ridge Serpent, 18s 300s. 300 of them, banded black and rust, thick as a man's arm, lying out on the hot stone in the open where anything with eyes could count them. By noon, 60. He bit once and moved on, because 9 a second finished them without him. By dark, 148, and the hawk had learned to stand on the ones that thrashed. Then he logged out, and the ridge kept going without him. Pride A.H. Ridge Serpent, 231, 300 bis. 69 left when he put the helmet back on. They took an hour. Props, Casas, Ridge Serpent, 300 and 300 and end-line threshold. Met props are absorbed. 5 trops, 5 trops, 5 trops, 5 trop. The bands came in first, black and rust down both flanks over the snake scale he already had. Then the body followed them, his ribs unpacked. His spine ran out longer than it had any business running, and the whole animal stretched from a workhorse into something that had the lie in a curve to fit on the ledge. Head at one end, tail folded back past his own shoulder, a horse's length of him and then some more. The wings on his back stayed exactly as useless as they had been on day 1. The hide was the real gift. Serpent banding is layered, and the Ridge elites that had been putting 11 on him put 4. Then the Ridge went quiet, which is how he found her. She was in a chalk sinkhole at the north end, coiled around herself in 6 flat rings, milk white, blind, with the shed skins of about a century stacked in a collar behind her head. Every Ridge Serpent he'd killed for 2 days had been her brood. Something in the system considered that his fault. The Queen, level 119. 46,000 health. He had 2,400. A named boss in Worldfall drops the thing it is made of. A queen of poison, sitting at the top of a poison line in a zone that kills 4 million people just by existing around them, was going to drop the answer to the zone. Spencer knew what that was worth before he took a step down the chalk. 8 days of watching an auction board had taught him one number, and it was demand. She opened by lifting her head and breathing on him. It came out as a low white mist that dropped over the whole floor of the sinkhole, and everything it touched locked. The hog stopped mid-charge with 1 foot up. The burrower froze half out of the chalk. The climber, the fourth animal, a wall-walking lizard he'd beaten off the sinkhole rim that morning for 90,000 coins of bond slot, stuck to the wall like a wet leaf. 12 seconds a lock. 30 seconds between breaths. Spencer's glands ate it. Poison doesn't hold a thing that makes poison. So, the fight became arithmetic, and he'd already done it on the way down. 38, a bite plus 9 a second, held on her forever, while 4 animals took turns being frozen, so that one of them was always standing somewhere she wasn't looking. 38 damage. IA poisoned. 9 CCG. Her own poison did nothing to him, and his never came off her. The runner drew the head. The climber dropped rocks and ran the wall. The hog got locked 4 times and got up 4 times. Spencer stayed on her tail and bit the same wound. 26 minutes. Possack, last hit, mongrel. She came apart in the chalk with her collar of skin still on and dropped 9 sets of poison-resist gear, the recipe pattern that made them, and her own mist hood. Then she started respawning on a 10-hour timer, which meant a woman-shaped hole in the market with a clock on it. He camped it twice, 31 sets. Here's the part that mattered, and it wasn't the fight. 4 million players were now standing at the edge of a forest they could not enter, because the forest breathed 20 a second and the only gear on the planet that stopped it had dropped out of one blind snake in a hole nobody could reach. The recipe was in a monster's inventory. The monster was not selling the recipe. Poppy asked him first. She died to the ridge air 11 times on stream that afternoon, and she asked the mongrel straight out, in a whisper, on camera, whether he had anything for poison. He said he had 31 sets. She dropped her mouse. Now, the auction. He did not buy a skin. He did not use a proxy, or a broker account, or a nice human face to stand in front of it. Nobody had ever seen an auction hosted by the seller's own teeth, so with 23 days left on the clock, the mongrel walked into the trade district of the capital city, all horse length of him, banded black and rust, sacks swinging under his jaw, and lay down on the auction platform where the merchant NPCs stand. Guards aggroed, he ignored them. Poppy set her camera on a roof with 480,000 people behind it. The crowd was 11 deep by the time he opened. Lot 1 was a single set. He asked 5,000 coins for it. Pressed, sold, 61,000. 12 times his asking price, and the winner was a guild officer who had crossed the map in his underwear to get there. Lots 2 through 9 went in threes. The bidding stopped being about poison halfway through and started being about who was going to be able to farm the forest first, which is a different and much more expensive thing to want. 3 sets, 140,000. 3 sets, 190. 3 sets, 210,000 coins, and the man who won those 3 was buying for the guild sitting second on the player board. In white kit, spending like the board position was already his. He took the next lot too. And the next. 6 sets in a row went to the same white tabard, and the crowd on the platform stopped bidding against him and started shouting at him instead, because a monopoly forming in real time in front of 11,000 people is the one thing an auction crowd will not sit still for. Somebody bid against him out of spite and paid 30,000 over for the privilege. Spencer let it run. Every coin of that spite was his. He wanted the hood. So did everyone, once Spencer put it up. The mist hood locks anything with lungs for 12 seconds, and there are maybe 9 things in a competitive game worth more than 12 seconds. Opening bid, 100,000. Minimum raise, 20,000. It took 4 minutes. It went past every recorded sale in Worldfall's 9-day history at 1.3 million, and kept climbing while the trade district crowd made a noise Popey's mic could not handle. The man in white had 800,000 coins left after his 3-set spree. He bid all of it. He bid it twice. 2,400,000 coins. Sold to somebody else by 20,000. Poor Tensive. Sold Tensive Minis. A highest recorded sale, Worldfall. Coins were trading at 44 to the dollar by then and still falling, so everybody watching did the same division at the same time and arrived at a number that made the chat go sideways. 4,900,000 coins, 40 minutes, 1 seller. Bro, the seller was a snake with legs lying on a merchant's floor. The man in white typed one line into auction chat before he left. He said he'd remember the lizard's face. He said it in front of 480,000 people, and he did not log off after. He stood at the edge of the platform until the last lot closed, watching the thing that had taken his guild's quarter of a year of funding in under an hour. Spencer read it and let it sit there. He had 40 raid sets still on the board under the same seller name and no reason at all to be careful. The gear went where gear goes. 31 sets went on to 31 of the strongest players in the game, and by the next morning every one of them was standing on the ridge he had spent 2 days clearing alone, killing the respawns, breathing his air. The sets that resold went at double what he'd charged for them by lunch. That was the price of the biggest sale in Worldfall's history, and he'd known it going in. He had sold 4 million people a door into his own farm. He'd taken the whole line already. Let them have the leftovers. Out here it was Thursday, and Haiti had laid a shirt on the end of his bed for the dinner. She always did the buttons. She had done the buttons for 11 months, standing over him with that patient face, and he had never once been able to hold the cuff still for her. That morning his left arm came off the blanket on its own. It came up slow and wrong and shaking, and it got to his chest, and the dead hand closed on the cuff and held it while his right hand pushed the button through. Then it did the second one. Then it stayed up there, on his own chest where he had put it, until he decided to let it down. He was still sitting like that when Haiti came in with the tie. The dinner was 11 people at Crawford's table, and Spencer was at the corner in the chair with his hands in his lap, being quiet, being weak, being exactly what everyone in the room needed him to be. Crawford was good. That was the thing nobody outside the family ever understood about him. He stood up with a glass and thanked Haiti's colleagues for coming, and he thanked the doctors, and he made a joke about the company's quarterly filing that landed, and he put his hand on the back of Haiti's chair the whole time without once touching her. Then he set the date. 3 weeks Saturday, Crawford said. We've waited long enough, and the paperwork agrees with me. Applause. Haiti smiled at the tablecloth. Spencer did the arithmetic with his fork. 3 weeks. Saturday was 21 days. 21 days was the merge. Same afternoon the servers wrote themselves into the world. Crawford would be standing in front of a registrar with the last of the family's signature block, and the 2 clock Spencer had been carrying in his head since the hospital collapsed into 1 clock. He looked up. Haiti was watching him. She reached over and cut his meat for him without being asked, because that was the kind of person she was. And she asked if he was warm enough, and she had no idea she was sitting in the middle of it. Crawford asked how the game was. Spencer said it was a good distraction. Crawford said he was glad, and meant it, because a distracted cripple is a solved problem. 21 days. His phone went off against his thigh at the end of the table, and it was not the auction board. It was a forwarded note from Crawford's finance office, sent to every signatory on the family accounts, the way those things get sent. Routine month-end review. One flagged item, highlighted yellow, the full liquidation of a minority holder's personal assets on the first of the month, unexplained, into a foreign payment channel. Somebody in the accountant's office had written a single word after it. Reversible? Spencer walked out of that auction with 4,900,000 coins and 20 days on the clock, and that is a combination that has ruined better men than him. The arithmetic looked friendly. 1 creature line cost him about a day and a half. 20 days left meant maybe 6 more lines, and he wanted 11. So he did the greedy obvious thing. Pack bond. Slot 5, 150,000. A slot 6, 240,000. A slot 7, 380,000. A slot 8, 600,000. A slot 9, 980,000. 2,360,000 coins, spent in under a minute, non-refundable. Bond slots are the one thing in Worldfall the auction board will not buy back. 4 animals at breakfast, 9 by lunch. Then he split them. 4 went south with the runner, out to the tidal flats where the mud goes to the horizon and the shellbacks sit in it. Plated crabs, the young ones the size of a dinner plate, the old ones wide as a coffee table lid. Shellback, 12s to 250. 4 went east with the hog into the burn canyon for the cinder grubs, segmented things wedged in the rock cracks, glowing orange along every seam, forearm length at the canyon floor and fence post long at the top. Probit, cinder grub, 31s 400 BS. 2 zones, 2 counters. 4 hours of ground between them, and 1 monster running it. And bro, for 1 day it worked. Shell plate hit the auction board in quantities the crafting guilds had never seen, and 400 low-level players who'd been stuck outside the mudline all week walked into a zone somebody else had already cleared for them. Poppy put a map on stream with 2 red circles on it and told 160,000 people that the mongrel was running 2 farms at once, in 2 directions, and that she personally could not get one done. By dark, the shellbacks read 250 of 250. The grubs read 371 of 400. 29 grubs. He had 9 animals in a canyon and 29 grubs left in it, so he did the thing that seemed free. He stood on the mudline and started the absorb while the canyon kept working. S. Shell. Back. 250C 250. S. Line threshold. Met. Absorbing. Ass. Absorbing. 8. Sichi. That was new. Every part before this one had gone in like swallowing. This one came with a bar, and the bar meant the game was doing something to him that took time. 4 seconds in, his back began to plate over. 6 seconds in, the canyon finished. Cinder grub. 400 400. 400 Mets mine. Line threshold. Mets mine 4. 2 claims. 1 body. Prots. Rejected. Line impure. Parts. The counter he had watched since the first night went blank. Not 5, not 4. A dash where the number lived. Then, everything he had taken in 8 seconds came back out of him. It came off his spine as a gray ring and went out flat across the mud, 40 feet in every direction, and it did not care what it touched. The half-grown plate on his back cracked and slid off in sheets. The shellbacks he had not eaten died where they sat. The mud stood up in a wall and fell down again. Then the ring reached his animals. Bond severed, bond severed, bond severed. Bond severed, bond severed, bond severed, bond severed, bond severed. 6 of 9, in the time it takes to read 6 lines. Here is the part that cost him, and it wasn't the 5 new ones he'd bought that morning and barely knew. The burrower had been standing at his front foot. The burrower was the first thing in the world that had ever chosen him. It was a blind digging animal with a shovel head and no fight in it at all, and it had come up out of the floor of a flooded quarry 11 days ago and stayed. It dug his ambushes. It dug the queen's sinkhole wider so the hog could turn around in it. When Spencer logged out, it went and slept against his leg because that was where it slept. It came apart in the gray ring without making a sound. He waited 8 hours anyway. He waited 8 hours at the mudline because bonded animals respawn on an 8-hour timer. The bond remembers them and puts them back. The rejection had burned the bonds. Nothing came back. Nothing was going to. 3 animals left. 2,360,000 coins of empty slots. 2 finished lines, 650 kills, and the counter still sitting on 5. The rule was the whole cost of it, and it was 1 sentence long. 1 line at a time. Finish what you start. He logged out, and he did not log back in for 2 days. Which is how he came to be sitting in a courtyard out here when the rest of this happened. Day 18. The hospital transport dropped him at the Arch of Haiti's building at 4 in the afternoon, and he sat where the driver left him because the ramp was on the far side, and the far side had people on it. Haiti's building is 40 flats around a concrete courtyard with a dead fountain in the middle. She rents there because it is cheap, and it is cheap because his hospital year ate everything she had, and Spencer had 11 months of knowing that and no way to fix it that didn't involve explaining where 4 million coins came from. There were 6 men by the fountain. 5 in work jackets, 1 with a folder. The folder man was doing the talking. The building's owner was offering $3,000, cash, today only, to any tenant who signed the sheet in his hand. A waiver giving up every repair claim on the block, past and future, in exchange for the money. Damp up 4 floors. Cracked risers. Sign it and the next 20 years of that damp came out of the tenant's own pocket, in a flat nobody would ever buy off them. $3,000 for that. 26 of 40 had signed already. 14 left, and he had come back for them, and Haiti's number was on his list. A woman from the 2nd floor said she'd had a surveyor in. She said the word mold twice. One of the jackets took her by the arm and started walking her toward her own door. Phones came up. Spencer counted 9 of them, held at chest height by people who had decided that filming it was the same as helping. The jacket walked her straight past the chair, and on the way past he put a hand on the wheel and pushed it aside and told Spencer to move out of the road. That is the part everyone in that courtyard was used to. A man in a chair is furniture you steer around. Spencer got a hand on his sleeve. He didn't say much. Something about letting go of her in the flat voice of a man nobody in that building had looked at twice in a year. The jacket kicked him. Not a shove. A boot. Swung at chest height at a man strapped into a chair. Spencer's left forearm came up and met it. The one that had been dead until Thursday. It came up faster than the kick did, and the boot stopped against it like it had hit a doorframe, and the man who owned the boot went over backwards onto the concrete in front of his own crew. Spencer looked at his own arm. He had not told it to do that. Nobody moved for about a second. Then somebody at the back said, "Do it again," and one of the others pulled a baton off his belt. That one came down overhand at Spencer's head. He took it on the same forearm. There is a noise a steel baton makes when it lands on bone, and the bone wins, and 40 flats worth of people heard it. The baton bounced. Spencer's arm did not move an inch off where he'd put it. He turned it over, took the man's wrist in his hand, and closed his fingers until the baton dropped in his lap. 11 seconds, start to finish, and he never came out of the chair. He couldn't. His legs were exactly as dead as they had been that morning, and both wheels stayed locked where the driver had set them, and that is the whole reason the courtyard could not process what it had just watched. A paralyzed man's arm had moved too fast. A paralyzed man's arm had taken a baton and gone on holding a sleeve. No glow, no claws, nothing on him that a phone could point at and call a monster. The crew backed off the fountain. The folder man looked at 9 phones and did the sum, and then he tore the top sheet off his own pad, which is not the same as tearing up the waiver, and left with it under his arm. 14 flats did not sign that week. The woman from the second floor got down on her heels beside the chair and thanked him. Somebody's kid asked him how he did that. Spencer said he'd been lucky and asked to be pushed round to the ramp. Haiti had come out of the stairwell in time for the baton. She stood in the doorway with the shopping still in both hands, and she did not say one word about it, then or at dinner, and Spencer understood exactly what that silence was. 90 seconds of it went up that night from a 4th floor window. 40,000 views by midnight, no name attached, the title just calling him the guy in the wheelchair. The courtyard had already settled on its own answer by then, the way crowds do, that he'd been military once, that men like that keep it in the hands. Nobody in the comments said the word game. Spencer let them have it. A wrong answer, everybody agrees on, is still the best armor money can't buy. The man who came to the door the next morning was not from the newspapers. He was about 50, gray coat, no hurry in him at all. He showed a card that named an agency and gave Haiti a business smile, and he asked whether Spencer had been hurt, and Spencer said no. Then he asked one real question. He asked how long the arm had been coming back. Spencer said a few weeks. The man wrote nothing down. He said his department had been reading Worldfall's patch notes since launch. Not the forums, the patch notes, and version 1.03 had a line under miscellaneous about physical feedback improvements that maybe 17 people on Earth had noticed, 4 of whom worked for him. He said they were interested in a beast on that server people were calling the Mongrel. He did not ask if Spencer played it. "Whitaker," he said, at the door, "we're not here to take anything off you, not this week." Then he left. No offer, no speech, no threat, 4 minutes in the flat. Downstairs in the car, Whitaker put the folder on the passenger seat and thumbed to the back of it out of habit. 31 pages, server logs. A frame from a courtyard video with a forearm circled in white. And on the last page, clipped in on its own, a photograph of a smiling man in a good suit at a charity dinner, one hand on the back of an empty chair. Crawford. Spencer stayed off the game for 2 days. Worldfall waited exactly that long, and then it did the one thing that could pull him back. Day 17, 9 in the morning, every screen on every server lit up with the same box. H-word, world event, the open sky, E6 pillars stand, break them. H-word, all servers merged, 40 hours. 40 hours. 6 stone columns had come up overnight in the eastern highlands, each one about 400 feet of black rock with a lit anchor stone burning at the crown. While a pillar stood, the sky over that region stayed shut. Gray ceiling, no daylight, wind coming down the cliffs hard enough to walk a man backwards. Break the anchor stone, the column falls, the ceiling opens over that whole map, and whoever broke one first got a line of text with their name in it sent to every account on the planet. Purse clear, title awarded. 1 per pillar. 1 per pillar. The recommended level was 20. About 2/3 of the server was nowhere near 20, and about 2/3 of the server signed up anyway, because the box said all servers merged and nobody wanted to be the guild that sat out the first world event in the game's history. 2,600,000 players registered in the first hour. 40 servers folded into one map. Every guild on the board canceled whatever it had been doing and moved east, because a title that gets read out to 2.5 million people is worth more than any drop in the game. Then Spencer read the fine print at the bottom of the box and started laughing at his own ceiling. Event mutation. All wild creatures. Attributes doubled. Every player in Worldfall spent that morning gearing up against mutated wildlife. Spencer was the wildlife. AS 38 damage, TAS 76 damage, TAS S peasant, 9 TAS S PC poisoned, TAS S PCSS. His bite doubled while he was still lying on the ledge he'd logged out on. The hog swelled until it did not fit under its own tree. 2.5 million people had just been handed double experience, and the only creature on the server with a bank account and a plan had been handed double everything else. He spent 20 minutes on money before he went anywhere, because 2.5 million people gearing up in one morning is not a crowd, it's a market. Poison resist sets went off his board at 4 times their week old price to guilds crossing the ridge on the short road east. The recipe pattern he had kept back in the auction printed 9 more sets while he ate breakfast in a hospital bed. The exchange rate slid from 44 coins to the dollar down to 41 before lunch, which meant every coin in his bank had quietly gained on him again without him swinging at anything. Then he closed the board because coins were not what the next 40 hours were for. He went east. Pillar 4 stood on the storm shelf, a mile-long shelf of rock 1,000 feet up the cliff wall. 4 hours ground travel north of the burn canyon he'd burned 6 animals in. He knew the ground. He did not know what lived on it until he came up the ramp and the whole shelf lifted off in front of him. Stormhawks. Gray birds that open to the width of a garage door, hooked beak, feet like a pair of pruning shears. They ride the updraft coming off the shelf and they only land to eat. In event colors, they came off the rock in flights of 30 and stayed up there, circling, waiting for something on the ground to stop moving. Stormhawk, 6,500. 500. The biggest line he'd ever pulled up, on the one piece of ground the entire server was walking toward. And here is where the mudline still cost him. 9 animals would have taken that shelf in 3 teams. He had 3. The hog held the ramp, the climber went up the wall for the nests, and the runner drove the low flights back down into the rock where the hog could reach them, and that was the whole legion. No reserve, nothing to send anywhere else, nobody to hold a second front. Every hour those 3 worked was an hour they worked without relief. He did not stop to feel anything about it. He just counted 3 shapes instead of 9 and changed the plan to fit. 9 that night, Stormhawk, 61,500. Midnight, Stormhawk, 148,500. 3 in the morning, the counter stopped moving, and it wasn't the Hawks. It was everybody else. The Storm Shelf turned out to be the best event point farm on the map, and by the small hours, there were 400 players on it in a dozen kits, killing his line out from under him. Worldfall pays the last hit and nobody else. A hawk that died to somebody's arrow was a hawk that came off the shelf's population and never touched his counter. The line was being spent and not by him. Pardcar. Stormhawk, 152,500. Last hit. Ranger. White Kit C. So he stopped hunting hawks and started hunting the updraft. Every flight on that shelf launched from one of 4 crags. He put the hog on the widest crag and let it stand there like a toll gate. The runner took the ledge below and turned every dive into a chase that ended in the hog's mouth. He walked the 3rd crag himself, horse-long and low against the rock, and the birds kept coming down onto him because a thing without wings looks like food to a thing with them. 4 in the morning, Stormhawk, 260,500. 6, H Stormhawk, 349,500. Then the white kit came back with friends. Second on the guild board wears white, and one of their buyers had gone home from a certain auction 3 weeks earlier, having lost a hood by 20,000 coins. 60 of them came up the ramp in a wedge, with a ranger line behind, and they did not come to farm birds. They came to sit on the shelf until the ceiling opened, because whoever held the shelf when Pillar 4 fell would be standing in the only sunlight on the map. The hog met them at the ramp mouth. The climber dropped nests on the ranger line from 90 feet up. The rudder did what the rudder does, which is make 60 people chase one animal in the wrong direction for 11 minutes. Spencer kept eating birds. S. Stormhawk, 452,500. Trust me, that is the whole trick with him. Everybody else on that shelf was fighting for a piece of ground. He was fighting for a number. At 7 minutes past 7 in the morning, the hog went down under the wedge. Not severed, killed, the ordinary way, 8-hour timer, it would be back. But the ramp came open, and 60 players came through it onto a shelf holding one snake and two tired animals. The hawks came down for the noise. PS, Stormhawk. 500 ES, line threshold. Met Menace, absorbing, 8 secs PS. 8 seconds. He had 8 seconds of standing still, on open rock, with 60 people running at him. 1 second in, the shoulders started to split. 2 seconds in, the first arrows landed and did 4 damage between them. 3, 4, and the wedge closed to 20 feet with the front rank shouting that the boss was stuck. 5 seconds in, something came out of the split. Wet, folded, ribbed, longer than his own body. 6, 7, and the climber came off the wall into the ranger line, which bought exactly 1 second and cost the climber both its back legs. 8. Part absorbed. 6 parts, 6 parts, 6 parts. Now, since the first night of this story, he had been carrying a pair of wings the size of a paperback book. They had never done one thing. Every time he grew, pony, workhorse, a horse's length, and then some, the wings stayed exactly as useless as day one, and he had stopped mentioning them the way you stop mentioning a bad knee. They came open on the storm shelf, 22 feet tip to tip. Gray, ribbed, storm membrane, stretched between finger bones as long as a man, and the first thing they did was hit the wedge. The downstroke put the whole front rank flat on the rock. The second stroke lifted a horse-length monster off the ground in front of 60 people who had come up there to kill it. The third stroke put him over the cliff edge. He dropped 100 feet down the rock face with his wings shut and everything on that shelf watching him fall. Then he opened, and the updraft that had been feeding those birds all night caught him under both wings and threw him up past the shelf. Past the ramp, past the ranger line, into open gray air. He climbed. He turned on one wingtip with the cliff going by underneath and the shelf swinging past sideways under his belly. The tail worked out how to steer about 4 seconds before the rest of him did. He hit the ceiling of the storm, went through 100 feet of wet gray nothing, and came out the top of it, and above the gray the sky was clean and blue and empty for 200 miles. Nobody had been up there yet. There was nothing above the storm layer to fight, nothing to loot, no reason for a player to ever see it. He was the first thing on that server to look down at the tops of the clouds. He was a full drake now. Serpent length, plated back, drake head, and finally the wings the game had been laughing at him with for 2 weeks. 4 hours of ground travel to the burn canyon. 19 minutes in the air. He found the soft one from the air by watching somebody else's stream. Poppy had a raid map up with guild markers on it, because that is what her channel does during an event, and the marker cluster told him in about 10 seconds which pillar had 600 players on the wrong side of it. Then he turned around and went to Pillar 4. Here is what Pillar 4 looked like at 7:30 in the morning. 2 of the top 10 guilds had been on it since midnight. The anchor stone sits at 400 feet, the column has no holds worth the name, and their answer was engineering. A scaffold of crafted timber going up the north face in stages, 600 players on the ropes, a full crafting crew feeding it, maybe 2 hours from the crown. Somebody had a stream on it. The betting was on which of the 2 guilds got there first. Neither of them looked up. The mongrel came over the crown of Pillar 4 out of the cloud, folded, and landed on the anchor stone with all 4 feet. The crown guardian was a stone thing built into the column, 12,000 HP, and it hit like a truck at anything that came up the face at it. Nothing had ever come down onto it. He put the first bite through its neck seam. 76 damage. Chi AD poisoned. 18 CAGC. 3 minutes 40 seconds. That is what the guardian of a world pillar is worth to a monster that ate 500 birds. It came apart on top of its own column with 600 players, 2/3 of the way up the scaffold underneath it, and then he got both feet on the anchor stone and pulled. The light went out of it. 400 feet of black rock leaned and went and came down the far side of the ridge for 11 seconds. The ceiling over the eastern highlands tore open. Daylight came down on 2.5 million players at once, most of whom were looking straight up at it. Then every account in Worldfall got the same 3 lines. Poor Jazz. World event. Pillar 1 has fallen. First clear. The mongrel, a title, awarded. First of the open sky. The system had said his name. Not a forum, not a clip, not a streamer. The game itself on 40 merged servers in the box that every single person on that map had open in front of their face. Poppy was live with 1,100,000 viewers when it landed. She read the middle line out loud twice, went quiet, and then her camera swung up because a shadow the length of a horse went over her raid at 300 feet with the new daylight behind it. That's him, she said. That thing has wings now. 900,000 people clip the same 4 seconds of sky. Down on the north face, 600 players stopped climbing a scaffold that now went up to nothing. The two guilds who had spent 7 hours building it had 11 minutes of argument on an open channel about whose fault it was, and every word of it went out on somebody's stream. Pillars, remaining, 5. And the whole event changed shape in about a minute. Nobody reorganized to farm birds. Every serious guild on that map pulled off its pillar and started asking the same question in the same 3 words. Where is it now? 5 titles left, 1 flying thing, and no way to build a scaffold faster than a wing. By dark, the boards were calling him the 6th pillar. It had not been free. He came off that column with 1 animal on an 8-hour death timer, 1 animal that would be dragging its back legs until the same timer ran, and a runner that had spent the night doing the work of 9. He owned the sky, and he had 1/3 of a legion under it. Quick cut, because the other ladder moved this week too. Gold Spire takes first on the player board on the morning of day 16. Crawford does it on paper, the way he does everything. The guild that had been sitting first since launch is the same guild that lost 40 raid sets to a snake in a quarry, and then watched those sets get resold on the open board at double. They are still first by member count, and they are broke by any measure that matters, and their best 31 raiders are on expiring contracts. Crawford buys the contracts. He buys their crafting patterns the same afternoon. The exchange rate is down to 38 coins to the dollar and still sliding, which means his money buys less every day he waits, which is precisely why he does not wait. AG Guild Board 1. Gold Spire. Then he opens a briefing to his officers with a map of the ridge, the Poison Ridge. The one every guild on the server now pays a beast in coin to walk through, and he calls it what it legally is. Occupied Prime Territory. Held by a world boss. Costing his guild 11% of its operating spend in tolls. We're not raiding it, he tells the room, we're clearing it. There's a difference, and the difference is that we don't stop. PC contract. Posted. The Mongrel, 9 million. Biggest bounty ever posted on that server, on a monster nobody has ever seen out of the game. Funded with money that still carries his dead parents' signatures, aimed at the only other person alive who remembers how this year ends. Back to the Drake. Because he logged out that afternoon, and the real half of this is the one that matters. Day 16, late, Hades flat. The spare bedroom that had been his since the hospital signed him out to family care that week. The rig on the desk and the window over the courtyard. Spencer took the headset off and sat in the chair with his hands flat on his thighs, which is a thing he had done maybe 400 times in a year. This time, both hands reported back. Warm skin, muscle. The dull ache of a leg that has been asleep for 11 months and is starting to wake up angry. He put both palms on the windowsill and locked his elbows and pushed. It did not work the first time. His body came up about 6 inches and folded, and he landed back in the chair hard enough to move it. He locked the wheels and did it again. The second time he got his weight over his own feet. His right leg took it. His left knee refused to hold anything until he leaned into it, and then it snapped straight and locked, and the whole thing balanced. Spencer stood up in his sister's spare bedroom. Not lifted, not strapped into a frame, not in a game. He held the windowsill with both hands and he did not move, because moving was not available. He could not lift a foot. He could not shift his weight off the sill without going down. There were no steps in this. There was a paralyzed man standing on his own 2 legs in the dark, at the window, over a courtyard with a dead fountain in it, and that was the entire event. 9 seconds, the first time. He sat down, breathed like he'd run somewhere, and did it again. The second attempt cost more than the first. Getting a dead man's weight over 2 feet is a job for the arms, and his arms had spent the year pushing a chair on flat ground. The sill took the shaking. His shirt stuck to his back. Somewhere around the 3rd try he worked out the order it wanted. Hands set, elbows locked, hips forward, then the left knee bullied straight, and once he had the order he had it. 40 seconds the second time. His hands were shaking on the sill by the end of it, and the shaking was from his arms, not his legs, which was its own kind of news. He had been standing in Worldfall since the first hour of the first night. Out here, the floor pushed back. The key went in the front door at the end of the 4th try. Spencer got down into the chair one-handed, dragged the blanket over his knees, and had the headset in his lap by the time He-T's shadow crossed the hallway light. She put her head in, asked if he'd eaten, told him a bird had gone into the courtyard glass earlier and made a noise like a dropped plate. He said he'd heard it. He asked her about her shift. She went to bed. She had missed it by about 11 seconds, and that was the closest anyone had come. That night, the clock on his phone rolled over. 15 days. Half the clock gone and half the body back. The event window shut at 9 in the morning on day 15, and Worldfall took its toys back. The open sky ended in 76 damage in the 38, damage in the force in the 18 sex, the poison in the force in the 9 assex. Halved in one box while he was asleep on a rock. Every wild thing on 40 servers went back to its own numbers, and so did he. 38 a byte and 9 a second, which was still the arithmetic that had put a 40-man raid on the floor in under 2 minutes, so he did not mourn it long. The Legion came back the same morning. The hog's 8 hours ran out under its tree, and it stood up in the dirt like nothing had happened. The climber had died in the night to something in the burn canyon, and when it respawned at the mudline, it had 4 legs again, because a bond does not remember an injury. It remembers the animal. 3 animals. 6 bond slots sitting empty and paid for, and he left them empty, because the rule he had bought for 2,360,000 coins was 1 line at a time. The other thing waiting for him was the number on the board. Contract. The mongrel. 9 million. Here is what 9 million coins buys. It buys men in gold trim on the Ridge Road at dawn. It buys 14 squads on the first day, 22 on the second, none of them getting past the 3rd crag. It buys a forum thread where people post their attempt number and their death timestamp like a running joke, and by the second night the thread is on attempt 211. It buys 91 death notices before lunch on day 14, logged by a beast that did not stop chewing to read them. It stopped being an event and started being weather. What actually changed his week was not the bounty. It was the wings. Before the storm shelf, a creature line was a geography problem. 4 hours to the canyon. 2 days east to the ridge. Half the map was ground he was never going to bother walking to. Now the whole map was 20 minutes wide. So he started clearing the small stuff. The 100 kill nothings nobody farms because the drops are worthless, tucked in caves and sea stacks and canopy that a ground animal cannot reach. Ash bats, in the roof of an unmapped cave whose mouth opened on a cliff face with no ledge under it. H-bat, 20 mice, 20 mice, 20, part absorbed, 7 buys to parts, 7 buys to parts. He grew ears, 2 fringed gray flaps that folded flat along the skull and came up like sails when something moved, and after that, the dark stopped being dark. Reef eels, on a drowned coast 4 islands out, which is why the line was still standing 8 weeks after launch. H-reef, eel, 90 smanzature, part absorbed, atro, parts, atro, parts, atro. 3 gill slits opened down each side of his throat. He went under and stayed under for 11 minutes and nothing happened, which was the point. 2 lines in 1 day. It had taken him 6 days to get the first 4. Bro, that is the part the boards never worked out about him. Everyone else was hunting the mongrel. The mongrel was doing chores. Thorn hairs on the high moor, 300 of them, done in an afternoon, with 3 animals driving them into a gully. Parton, thorn hair, 300. Part absorbed, 9 W parts, 9 W parts, 9. A ridge of black quills came up from the back of his skull to his shoulders. Anything that grabbed him from above learned about it. Glass moths, in the canopy over the flooded forest, at night, 250 of them going up like paper in a fire. Popper, glass moth, 250, 250, 250. Parts, 10. A second eyelid clears a wet window, closing sideways. 6 parts in 6 sections. 10 by the end of day 14. 41 was a long way off, and it had finally stopped being a joke. Then, on the evening of day 14, his sister logged in. Haiti played Worldfall. The game came free with the phone plan half her floor at work was on, and 11 of them had installed it the same Tuesday and made a guild out of it the way people make a pub quiz team out of an office. They met after shift. They gathered herbs. Their shared bank held about 9,000 coins, saved toward a house nobody needed. She was level 12. She played support, badly and happily, with a gathering bag and a wand she had never once used on a person. Spencer knew all of this because she explained the game to him over dinner while she cut his food, and he sat there with his headset on the desk behind him and let her. Their gathering route ran the low meadows under the poison ridge. Safe ground. Nothing in it above level 15. On day 14, at 7:30, 20 players in gold trim came out of the tree line and stood across the path. Goldspire had been sweeping the ridge approaches for 9 days, because the contract came with territory, and territory has to be worked. The tolls the Ridge used to pay a beast now got paid to the wing captain, backdated. That was the phrase he used, tollback. 5,000 coins a head for the ground they'd been walking on for a month, from a guild whose entire bank was 9,000. When the shift manager said they didn't have it, the captain told them what the alternative was. Gear on the ground, bags on the ground, then down on both knees in a line while somebody filmed it, because the point of an example is that other people see it. Kneel for the camera, he said, and you can walk home with your boots. One of them was streaming it to the guild channel already. The shift manager had already tried the sensible thing, twice, earlier that week. He had messaged 2 mid-board guilds about the sweep. Both of them had said the same thing in different words, which was that nobody on that server was going to stand between Goldspire and 9 million coins for a group of level 12s with a herb bank. So they went down. Of course they went down. 9 ordinary people in their 30s on a Tuesday night playing a game to unwind after work, put their bags in the grass and knelt in a row in front of 20 raiders. Haiti was the last one standing. The woman from her floor had hold of her sleeve, pulling down, telling her it was only a game and it was only a minute. She stayed standing anyway, and she did not have one reason for it that anybody watching could name. The captain walked down the line to her. He never got there. 300 feet up, on the Ridge Road he had been flying twice a day since Goldspire started collecting on his ground, something with a 22-foot span had already turned. He came down through the meadow at an angle nobody on the ground had time to look up at. The first thing the 20 in gold trim saw was the grass going flat in a circle, and then a horse-length drake with a plated back was standing between the kneeling line and the raiders. The captain got one order out. He told his people to tag it, because a contract pays the guild that lands the tag, and 20 raiders in gold trim had just been handed 9 million coins in a meadow. Then the readout started. Axe turd 8 damage. Wise 9's turd 8 poisoned. 9's turd 8 mongrel. Last hit mongrel 8's turd A. Last hit mongrel 8's turd A. Last hit mongrel 8's turd A. Nobody wrote a strategy about this one afterward, because there was nothing in it to write down. The runner cut the 2 on the flank before they finished turning. The hog took the healer off his feet and stood on him. The climber came down out of a meadow oak that nothing that size should have been in. 40 seconds, 19 death notices. Not a fight. A correction, the kind you make to a spreadsheet. The wing captain lived, because he was the only one being kept. He was on the ground with 9 damage, a second running through him, and his gold-trimmed mace in the grass 6 feet away, and he did the thing his own boots had been walking people through all week. He knelt. He offered the contract money. The monster picked up the mace in its mouth, walked past him, and put it down in Hattie's hands. She was level 12. The thing was two-handed, and it was heavier than she was ever going to be comfortable with, and she stood there with it, while 8 of her workmates got up off their knees behind her and nobody said anything at all. Then she swung it. AD 9 damage, TE 9 damage, TE 9 damage. 3 swings, and the captain who had wanted a kneeling video was down to 9 health with his own weapon coming back up over her head. The drake did not move an inch. Neither did anything else on that meadow, because everything else on that meadow was dead. 89 damage called by Haiti B. Her guild made a noise like a cup final. The shift manager was on his feet saying the handle over and over. That's the mongrel. That's actually the mongrel, the way you say a footballer's name in a pub. The gold-trimmed stream had never been switched off, which meant Goldspire filmed the whole thing themselves and put it out on their own channel to nobody's benefit but his. Somebody clipped the last 4 seconds and it was past 2 million views before Haiti went to bed. Then she put the mace down and thanked the monster. She did it the way she does everything, quickly and a bit embarrassed, asking first whether it could understand her at all and then saying thank you anyway in case it could. She dug out the whole gathering bag, a night's herbs, the only thing she owned worth anything, set it in the grass in front of it and said it was not much. He took it, because refusing would have meant explaining. He had talked on camera to a streamer with 1 million viewers. He had said his own name to 2.5 million people through a system box. Standing in a meadow 4 feet from his sister with her handwriting on the bag she'd just given him, he did not trust one single sound that was going to come out of his mouth. So he took the bag, and he went up, and she waved at the sky with both arms until he was a dot in it. 8 people from an office argued about which forum thread to post it in. The 9th was thinking about her brother at home in a wheelchair, and how much he would have liked to see that. He was, in fact, 10 feet away from her on the other side of a wall the whole time. Later that night, with the headset on the desk and the flat quiet, he put his palms on the sill and stood up again. 2 minutes, this time, wheels locked, both hands down. His left knee held on the first try instead of the third. What did not happen was a step. He could not lift a foot off the floor, could not turn, could not let go of the sill and stay up, and standing at a window is not walking, which is a distinction he made out loud to an empty room. He picked up one more line off the pillar wreck at dawn, because it was on his way. Parian. Karian hook, 100 noddered. Parts, 11. Talons on the back feet now, 4 inches and curved, closing on anything he decided to carry. 13 days. Now, one desk. Crawford watches the footage on the morning of day 13, in an office with the blinds down on his own guild's channel because his own people uploaded it. He does not watch it for the monster. He watches it for the loss. 19 raiders and a 9-day sweep of prime territory undone in 40 seconds, which is a line item. Then he winds it back because something in it does not sit right. The monster lands in front of the kneeling line. Before it touches anything, before the first number goes up, it sweeps the smallest player behind its shoulder with the back of one leg. Not fast. Not part of the attack. The way you move a kid back off a curb without looking at them. It does it again 9 seconds later with a second player. Same leg, same side. Every time, the same side. Crawford is a man who has read a lot of combat logs. What he says, out loud, to nobody, is that it isn't fighting the raid. It's escorting the civilians, and no boss in any game he has ever paid people to play has done that, because no boss has anything to escort. He winds it back a 4th time and lets it run with the sound off. Somewhere under his ribs, a very old memory tries to hand him something, and he does not take it. He is not a superstitious man. He simply sits there in a dark office with a paused frame of a drake and a level 12 gatherer, and finds that his coffee has gone cold and cannot tell you when. On the morning of day 13, Worldfall opened the gates. The open gates. 7 days 1. Arch per server, R server. A stone arch went up in every capital, 40 of them, all lit the same cold white. Walk through yours and you came out on somebody else's map. War score paid a point a kill on foreign ground and 1,000 an hour for holding a foreign objective, and at the end of the week, the server sitting top of the board kept a permanent regional buff while everybody else kept nothing. Cross-server war week. On paper, a tournament. What actually came through their arch was 11 guilds off one server, 90,000 accounts in the first 6 hours, and no interest whatsoever in a tournament. They did not go to the Poison Ridge. They did not go to the Tower or the Burn Canyon or anywhere a fight would cost them a repair bill. They went south to the flat green starter meadows where 4 million people were still learning which button was jump. There was a respawn stone at the level 4 crossing. 40 of them stood on it for 9 hours. One account logged 41 deaths in a row without ever getting upright, and his starter kit sat in the grass in front of him the whole time. Because you cannot pick your own gear up while somebody is standing on the button. Hades' work guild logged in at 7, died twice on the Meadow Road without seeing what killed them, and went back to arguing in the group chat about whether the pub did food on a Wednesday. Poppy put a map on stream, with the whole south of it colored red. The gate opened onto the stair pass, which is a cut in the rock 40 feet wide with a drop on one side and a wall on the other, and which is the only way down to the Capitol Road. There was one creature standing in it. Their raid leader had done his homework, which is why what he said on the open channel was sensible. He told his front rank not to trade with it and not to chase it, just to hold the mouth of the cut open for 4 minutes while the second guild came through behind them. 4 minutes was a good number. It was a plan. The first push was 600 players wide and lasted 90 seconds. Poor damage. Point damage, 1 damage. Point damage bow. 600 people, every weapon they owned, 31 damage total. He had 3,900 health. A siege lance went into his shoulder and the number that came up was 1, and their own front rank stopped pushing to read it twice. Then the readouts went the other way. 38 a bite, 9 a second, and a downstroke off a 22-foot span that put the front 2 ranks on their backs so the runner could work the flanks. The hog held the low shoulder. The climber sat on the wall above the arch and dropped on anything that made it 4 steps past him. 9 hours. Somewhere around 11,000 of them came up that cut in relays with siege gear, with stacked buffs, with a rotation that a very good raid leader had clearly spent his lunch on. Their whole day put 190 damage on him. Bro, that is not a fight. That is weather with a body. Here is the part their alliance did not think through. Invaders bring their own cameras. 40 foreign streams were pointed at the same 40 feet of rock by mid-afternoon, the biggest of them running 300,000 viewers in a language nobody on our server spoke, and it does not matter what language you say, one damage in, it lands the same. Poppy co-streamed the pass to 1,400,000 and mostly just let their feeds play. Around the 6th hour, she stopped talking over it entirely, put her hands flat on the desk, and said the handle twice into a chat moving too fast to read. 11,000 dead players leave a lot of kit on the floor. He did not list any of it. He carried it down in loads and dropped it in a heap at the level 4 crossing, on the respawn stone, with the guild tabard still on it, and told the meadow to help itself. It took the beginner zone about 4 minutes and there was a queue. Their alliance had an explanation ready by then, and it was a good one, and it was wrong. They said the pass had been a scripted server defense, an event boss the developers seeded to keep the weak honest. Half their own chat believed it. It is a very hard thing to accept that a server's whole defense went to bed at 11 because it had work in the morning. At dusk, he stopped holding the cut. He walked up through the arch instead, with 3 animals behind him, onto their map. Their side was a salt flat under drowned pines, white and flat as a plate. The glare off it is a hazard. Accuracy down a quarter on anything that has to aim with eyes, which is a nuisance for players and nothing at all for wildlife, and he had been wildlife since day 1. Standing in the middle of it was the thing their whole week was built on. HD, War Beacon, held by HD 1,000 points hour. Their server had been first on the board all week at 190,000. It is a hard number to grow when there is a Drake lying on the beacon. He camped it for 31 hours. Their score did not move once. He also did his chores while he was there, because a foreign map has foreign lines on it, and nobody on our server had ever been able to farm these. Propian, Salt Scorpion, 200 A200. Part absorbed, 12 props 12, 12 props 12. A tail came up over his back, segmented, ending in a hooked barb about as long as a man's forearm. It rode above him now like a crane arm, and it did not need him to look at it. At M. Mirror Skink, 350H 350, first E50, part absorbed. 13 mirrors apart, 13 mirrors. His hide took the color of whatever he was lying on. On the salt he went white, all of him, tail and wings and plated back, and their scouts flew a grid over the beacon twice and reported it clear. They pushed him 9 times. The biggest push was 6,000 players, and it lost 20 minutes just finding him. Their negotiators came out on the second morning, and he let them stand there and say their piece. He gave them a list. Then he went back to lying on their beacon, and everything that happened after that was them deciding whether to pay it. It was not free. The 6th push came in with 400 archers on a dune line and killed the hog outright, and he spent 8 hours at the camp with 2 animals and a hole where his left flank used to be. The runner got him through it by being somewhere else, constantly. Their main city could not run its own event. Nobody on that server scored a point for a day and a half. 1,000 points an hour, 31 hours, sitting under a white drake nobody could find. On day 11, they gave up on the board and went on camera. Poppy hosted it, with a translator in the corner of the frame and 1,900,000 people watching, and 4 alliance leaders sat in a row in a lobby on their own server and read out what they had agreed to. The list, read out in full, in their own voices. 6,400,000 coins, which was all 4 guild banks. 9,000 starter sets, 1 mail to every account they had killed in the meadows, at their own cost, from their own crafters. And the rest of the war week, 5 days of gate access, forfeited, so not one of them came back through until it closed. Their first officer said the only line worth keeping. We camped people who could not fight back. That is the part we are sorry for. The coins went to the Drake. The sets went to the mailboxes, because he had asked for it that way, and there is no version of that request that reads as anything other than what it was. The exchange rate went from 38 coins to the dollar down to 34, because his week had put more real money through the market than the auction had. And then his own server did something stupid and human. This is a server with 9 million coins of its money sitting on his head. Its forum has a thread where people post their attempt number like a running joke, and it was past attempt 211 a week ago. Gold Spire had been sweeping his ground for 9 days. By dinner on day 11, the thread had been renamed. The clips going round were the ones with the stair pass in them. Half the men who had been paid to hunt him that month were standing at the arch when he came back through it, and the phrase in the chat, over and over, in a language he did happen to speak, was "our monster." The contract did not come down. It just stopped being personal for a week. He took the helmet off at 11 at night, in a spare bedroom in a damp building round a dead fountain, and the interesting part of day 11 had not happened yet. Behind the kitchen door there was a mop with a wooden handle. He had it in the room already. He had put it there 2 days ago and told himself it was nothing. He got up off the sill the way he had learned to, hands set, elbows locked, hips over, left knee bullied straight, and this time he did not stop there. He put the handle down a foot in front of him and moved his right foot to meet it. That was the whole thing. That was a step. It took him 4 minutes to cross 9 feet of carpet, and he had to stop twice. Then he came back along the furniture instead, hand over hand, desk edge to bed frame to door frame, like a man working his way around the edge of a swimming pool. Then he let go. 3 steps, and he sat down hard on the bed. 5 steps on the second go. Then the whole 9 feet, sill to door, with nothing to hold and nothing under his hands, and then the 9 feet back, and he stood in the middle of the room with his heart going like he had sprinted. What still does not work, and he made himself list it, stairs, all of them, and he did not even try the one down to the courtyard. Speed. He walks slower than his sister does, and she is not a fast walker. Carrying anything, because his hands are part of the balance. And about 6 minutes, total, before the legs quietly stop taking messages. In public he stays in the chair. There is nothing to gain by not. The radio was on in the kitchen and Haiti was doing something with a pan, so he sat back down and rolled out and asked what was for dinner. From the chair, with his legs shaking under the blanket where nobody could see them. The kitchen telly was on mute behind her with the subtitles running, and it was the local evening news, and the item was a man in the north. 26, 8 weeks in a chair after a motorway crash, whose consultants had put their names to a statement that afternoon. Doctors confirm a paralyzed gamer regained. Then the subtitles caught up wrong and the item was gone, and Haiti asked him to pass the salt. Somebody else's doctors. Somebody else's statement. His own file still said permanent, in a folder in a hospital that had not heard from him since the spring, and he had no intention of calling them. 10 days. Cut to Crawford, day 10, blinds down. Last time we do this. He has the courtyard clip open on one screen, and his own guild's upload open on the other, and he has been sitting like that since the office emptied. The clip is 90 seconds long, shot out of a 4th floor window, and it has a wheelchair in it. A man in a chair takes a boot on his left forearm. Then a baton on the same forearm. The baton bounces. Crawford has watched a paralyzed man's arm do that 11 times tonight. On the other screen, the monster on the ridge sweeps the smallest player behind its left shoulder before it attacks. Same shoulder, same side, every time. He named that tell 3 days ago and put it away because it did not go anywhere. Then he opens the accountant's month-end note because he opens everything twice. Here is the arithmetic nobody else on earth can do, and the reason he can do it is that every number in it is one he touched. The liquidation went through on the 1st of the month. Not the 15th, not the day the reviews came out, the 1st before a single unit of that game had shipped into a foreign payment channel, and there is one typed word under it in a functionary's handwriting. Crawford knows the exact hour the paralysis started because he paid for the truck. He knows what week the rig went in because he chose it, bought it, and stood in the doorway while 2 men carried it up the stairs and gave the crippled boy a hobby. He has a courtyard clip of the arm. He has a monster that guards children like a man walking a kid back off a curb. And he has 3 weeks of local news items about early players in chairs whose bodies are quietly being healed by something their consultants cannot name. The accountant has the money. The agency has the file. The internet has the clip. Nobody has all 4 but him. He does not get up. He does not throw anything. He sits there while the last of it closes. The cripple is not distracted. The cripple is the thing on the ridge that his own guild cannot get past. And the thing on the ridge is 10 days out from walking into a wedding. So he does what he has always done, which is to make it somebody else's job. He calls a security consultancy his company has used for 4 years on the number that does risk assessments for their warehouses. He does not say a name. He says a building, a floor, and a week. Find out what it costs to close a private matter this week. 2 invoices, $45,000 piece coded as site risk assessment, paid the month after the work. Deniable in the way a spreadsheet is deniable. Back to the Drake. Except not yet, because that night the work arrives. 11:40, day 10, Wednesday. Hattie is at the pub with 9 people off her floor, arguing about whether the kitchen shuts at 10 and she will be home at midnight. Spencer is in the spare bedroom with the helmet off, 4 minutes into 6, standing at the sill with his weight on his own legs. The stairwell door in that building has been broken since the waiver crew came through. The flat lock is 40 years old. The contractor is very good and does everything right. He comes up the stairs instead of the lift because there is no lift. He is quiet in the hall. He goes for the bedroom because the light is under that door, and a man in a wheelchair is a job that takes 4 seconds and looks like a fall. The man who turns round from the window is standing up. That is the only free half-second Spencer gets, and he does not use it well. He crosses the room too slowly, which is the only speed he has, and the contractor meets him at the desk and puts him into the wall. Then the rest of it happens without asking him. A hand comes at his throat and his left forearm is already there. The forearm does not move. Something small and gray comes up under his ribs and his right hand has the wrist before he has decided to reach, because for 9 days the thing that owns those reflexes has been eating snakes. He turns the wrist over. It goes with the sound like a chair leg. 9 seconds, start to finish. And then his legs stop taking messages. 6 minutes was 6 minutes. They went out from under him mid-grip, and he came down on the carpet with the man's arms still locked in both hands, and he lay there in the dark holding on because letting go was not an option he had. His hands were shaking, not from fear. He had felt them keep closing, past the wrist, past where it was over, and he had been nowhere near stopping. He had not killed him. That was the whole of it. He had not decided not to either. Bro, that is the part that frightened him, not the knife. The car had been on that courtyard for 6 nights. 2 of them came up in under a minute and took the contractor alive, which was Whitaker's whole point in being parked there. They put him face down over the desk that had the rig on it. Nobody drew anything. Nobody made a speech. Whitaker came in last, in the same gray coat, and stood in a doorway looking at a man on the floor 9 feet from an empty wheelchair, with the wheels locked at the window. He did not ask. He wrote 3 lines in a notebook. One of them was the time. He held it flat, angled at the lamp, long enough for Spencer to read all 3 from the carpet, and not one of them said where the chair was. Lock this behind us. We'll be outside until Thursday. Then he took the notebook and the contractor and left the mop handle exactly where it was lying. The man talked in about 4 hours and not out of guilt. He talked because he was contract labor with an invoice number and no reason on earth to eat a charge for a client he had never met. He gave a consultancy. He gave a job code. The consultancy billed a facilities company, the facilities company billed a holding company, and the holding company belonged at 40% to a group that a man had inherited by burying its owners. Whitaker did not go and arrest anybody. He went and got the invoices. The next morning, Goldspire stopped pretending the contract was business. They had spent 9 days sweeping ground and losing enforcers on it, and their answer was to buy the war outright. The mercenary board filled up overnight because the 4 guilds off the foreign server had just emptied all 4 of their banks, paying a tribute of 6,400,000 coins, and broke men worked cheap. 9,000 of them signed. Goldspire put 2,000 of its own on top. A mercenary contract, Goldspire, 9,000, signed. They came up the poison ridge from 3 sides at once. The ridge does 20 damage a second to anything that breathes, so all 11,000 of them came wearing poison resist sets, which exist because he farmed the line, and which they could only buy because he sold the recipe's output on an open board. Their siege was wearing his product. Their healers were reading his patch notes. Porcine, 38 damage. Poisoned. 9 CCC, last hit. Mongrel. Brogrul, Mongrel. 6 hours. 260 damage on him total out of a pool of 3,900. The hog held the ridge road, which is 4 feet wide in 2 places and cannot be flanked by a man who has to keep his helmet sealed. The runner worked the scree behind them, where men in full plate cannot turn. The climber sat over the chalk sinkhole and dropped on anybody who tried to come round it. Their commanders were not stupid. They pushed the north face at hour 2 with 2,000 at once and got up the first crag, which nobody had managed in a month, and it bought them 90 seconds and cost them 400 men. He spent the gap after that push, re-gearing the Legion out of the corpses in front of him. The hog into a mercenary breastplate, 2 sizes past anything it had worn, the climber into gauntlets it did not need and took anyway. 3 animals in bought armor that somebody else had paid signing fees for. 4,000 death notices before noon. 9 of them were officers in gold trim, and the 9th was the captain from the toll sweep, who had been kept alive once already. Poppy co-streamed the wipe to 1,200,000 and mostly did sums out loud, because the mercenary board is public and so are the fees. Gold Spire paid 2 million coins in signing fees that morning. It bought 4,000 corpses. She worked it out on screen, said the number twice, and let it sit there. 500 coins a body. He stripped the field. 2,600 poison-resist sets came off the ridge, and he did not drip them out over a week the way a seller with a market to protect would have. He posted one line on the board announcing the lot, and dumped all of it at once. Sold 900, sold 900, sold 900, sold 900. A set that opened at 61,000 coins in the capital 8 days ago went for 900 by dinner. He broke his own market on purpose, because a mercenary who cannot sell his kit at the end of the week does not come back on Friday. The exchange rate slid from 34 coins to the dollar down to 31. Trust me, that number fallen is the only scoreboard in this story that has never once gone the wrong way. Nothing on that ridge was a new creature line. Parts, 13. The counter sat where it was and did not move all day, and for once that was fine, because the thing he needed that afternoon was not another part. He did the sum on himself instead, on the carpet where his legs had quit the night before. Arms, back, hands, grip, reflex, done, all of it, better than done. The legs run 6 minutes and then stop, and 6 minutes is not a wedding. 13 parts had bought him a body that could beat a professional to death by accident and then fall over. The rest of it was not going to arrive from resting. It was going to arrive from one more line, and there was exactly one region left on that map big enough to carry it. At 6 that evening, a card came to the flat from the family office, and Haiti read it out at the kitchen table with her coat still on. The registrar had a cancellation, family reasons. The ceremony had been brought forward to Saturday, and would everyone please confirm? She said she would have to get the dress taken in by Thursday in the voice of a woman reading a work rota, and put the card behind the fruit bowl. It cost his brother one phone call and a fee. It took 4 days off, the only clock that mattered. 6 days. 6 days, and he did not spend the first 2 of them on the big one. He spent them stamping small lines off the wing, because a small trait is still a tick, and the counter had been stuck on 13 for a week. 31 hours. 27 lines. Chalk beetles in the quarry spoil. Fen leeches under the mill weir. 300 sand wasps in the dune bowls between 2 in the morning and 6. Barbels, spurs, a second stomach. An ear that hears through rock. Parts, 20 mides of parts, 34 mides of parts, 38 parts, 40 mides of parts, 40 parts, and his legs still ran 6 minutes and stopped. Small lines pay small. Then he flew southeast for 3 hours, to the one place on that map he had been saving since the day he hatched. The caldera. A dead volcano 4 miles across, ash shelves stepped down the inside of it like seats in a theater. Gas lying in the bottom, thick enough to kill anything that breathes. Live since launch. In 10 weeks, the server had not taken 1 kill out of it. 9 ledges, 1 animal on each. Party. Line. Elder Drake R, parent line. Drake Runt R, Elder Drake RR L9 A9. He sat on the rim and read the second line 4 times. The joke class was not a joke. A runt drake the size of a big dog with wings too small to fly is what an elder drake looks like before it eats anything. The forums had spent 10 weeks laughing at a baby picture. Every stupid little line he had stamped in the last 31 hours had a job down there. The ears found them in the dark under the shelves. The hide went ash gray the moment he lay on ash. The gills held in the gas at the bottom for the 11 minutes it took to cross it. 90,000 health apiece. 900 damage a breath, and his whole pool was 3,900, which is 4 breaths and a funeral. They are territorial. That was the only mercy in the place. 9 of them within sight of each other, and not one of them lifts a wing for its neighbor. So, he took them one at a time, from underneath, at 38 a bite and 9 a second. The first one cost him 4 hours and 40 minutes. It finished with 310 health left on him. The climber died on the 3rd ledge. The hog died on the 7th and went on its 8-hour timer. He took the last 2 with the runner and nothing else. 29 hours in the crater. He came out of it at dawn on day 4. Elder Drake, 999, line threshold, Mets 90 secs. Absorbing, 90 secs. 90 seconds, not 8. He lay open on a ledge in falling ash with one animal standing over him and counted it down out loud, and nothing came because he had already killed everything in that crater that could have come. I part absorbed. 41 Mr. Parts, 41 Mr. Parts, 41 Mr. Parts. All attributes. Parts 500% in -R220. Damage in dash 228, damage in dash poisoned. 9 Mr. Sex in dash part sex, he sex parts, sex card sex, health. 3900s in dash health. Tester 2020 health. Health 20,000 part sex, arbiter part sex. 6 times everything off one line in 90 seconds. And the thing that stood up off that ledge was the size of a small barn. That silhouette is 30 days of eating, and every day of it is still showing. Serpent banding down the whole length. Ogre plate over both shoulders. Black quills from the skull to the back. 2 fist-sized sacs under the jaw. 3 gill slits each side of the throat. Gray fringed ears folded flat. A 4-arm-long barb riding over the spine. Hide the color of whatever he lies on. Carrion talons. The old drake head. And over all of it, 50 feet of storm membrane wing where 22 used to be. He shed nothing. He hid nothing. Every ugly thing he had ever taken off a corpse was on the outside of him where the whole server could count it. Trust me, that was the point. And it left him with a problem he had never had before, which is that there was nothing on that map left to eat. 41 lines. The Apex one done. Every region on the board was now a place he went to for money. Bro, and here is where he stopped being careful. There is a tower in the capital. 100 floors, 1 player at a time, your own name on the door, and a public board at the entrance that prints the 10 best runs on the server. That board had printed the same top line since launch week. Floor 31, 5 players, out of the guild sitting first on the board. The whole server had quietly agreed that 31 was where the game stopped being possible. He walked in as the mongrel in daylight in front of a queue. No mask, no second account, no pretending it was hard on the way out. The doors on the first 10 floors opened before he reached them. He passed 31 at 4 minutes 30, and outside, the question in the queue changed. First, it was whether he would get past 31. Then it was whether anything on 40 could hold him for a minute. By 60, they had stopped asking whether he would fail. They were arguing about where he would stop. Somebody in the chat said the other thing out loud, nobody clears floors like that, he is running something. At 19 minutes he was on 60 and the board outside had stopped scrolling because there was nothing left on it to scroll. The queue stayed where it was, nobody went home. Did Tower, 4100, first clear, the Mongrel Sire, run time, 51 minutes, previous best, 431. Poppy had 2,600,000 people watching a stone door, and when it opened she said one thing and then said nothing for a while. He didn't even pretend it was hard. The contract on his head was still sitting at the top of the mercenary board that evening. Contract. The mongrel, 9 mils and 1,000. Nobody took it out. Then he took the helmet off, slept 11 hours, and on the Wednesday morning he did the other thing. He had not phoned the hospital since the spring. He did not phone it that morning either. He went down 4 flights of his own stairs with a bag on his shoulder. He walked past the dead fountain in the courtyard where 9 phones had once filmed him in a chair. Then he got on a bus. 3rd floor, spinal clinic, the same corridor with the same carpet tiles. He gave his name at the desk and asked for the consultant who had signed his file, and then he stood in front of the window and waited because there was nowhere in that corridor he needed to sit. They had already pulled the folder by the time the man came out. It was open on the desk behind him. It had been open for a year, in every meeting anyone ever had about Spencer, at the page with the word on it. Permanent. The consultant looked at the folder. Then, at the man standing in his doorway with his coat over his arm, who had come in through the front doors past the ramp. They ran everything, nerve conduction in both legs. An hour on his back in the tube. A physio with a clipboard who asked him to push against her hand and then asked him to stop pushing. Results came back at 6. The consultant put the March scan up beside the one from that afternoon. He looked at the 2 of them for a long time without touching the mouse. The colleague he had called in for a second opinion asked him twice whether the names on both files matched. I wrote that word myself, in March. There's nothing here to write it about. Nobody in the room said cure. Nobody in the room had a word. Every time this ladder ticked, there was a list under it of what still did not work. No steps yet, no stairs. 6 minutes, and the legs quit. Here is that list now. Nothing. That is the whole list. The ladder is closed. He walked down 4 flights on the way out, carrying his own bag. The 6-minute mark came and went somewhere on the 2nd flight. Nothing happened at all. He asked them to amend the file before he left, and watched the word come off the screen. He signed the form that keeps him out of a case study for a week. The agency car was still parked on his courtyard when he got back, because Whitaker had said outside until Thursday and meant it. He was in the kitchen with the radio on when the notice went out. It went out in 2 places in the same minute. Every client on every server printed it. A spokesperson read the same 3 lines off a page on the evening news, while upstairs Haiti was pinning a dress that had to be taken in by Thursday. D Worldfall, global notice, D persistence update, all servers, Saturday, D.5 nit. After this update, character progress will no longer be limited to the client. Saturday. He put the cup down and did the sum against the window and got it wrong twice, because launch plus 30 lands on the Wednesday after this one. He had built an entire year around that Wednesday. Then he understood what he had actually been remembering. Last time, the world found out on the Wednesday. That is the day the newsreader said it, that is the day the accounts froze, and that is the date a dead man carried back with him. The merge had been running since the Saturday. It had been true for 4 days before anybody said so out loud. His 30 was never 30. It was 26, and a memory of when the news got there. Nobody arranged this. Crawford moved a wedding because a registrar had a cancellation and a fee. The developers picked a Saturday because Saturday is when you take a service down. Neither of those 2 rooms has ever heard of the other one, and his brother will not live long enough to enjoy the coincidence. Which means the 4 days he had in hand were never in hand. He had penciled the caldera in for the back half of next week. If he had run it on the plan he made 3 weeks ago, the persistence update would have come down on him midline, 40 parts deep, on legs that ran 6 minutes. He finished it early for one reason. His brother got impatient and moved a wedding and moved him. At the engagement dinner, he had done a sum under the table and found out he was watching 2 clocks that were secretly one. Now there is nothing secret about it. Haiti gets married at 11. The world stops being a game at midnight. Same Saturday, 1 line on a calendar, and everybody on Earth is finally looking at it. 3 days. 3 days, and the world spent 2 of them trying to buy what he had bought on the first one. The notice went up on the Wednesday evening. By Thursday morning, somebody had read the 3rd line properly. TA. After this update, character progress will no longer be limited to the client. Flow it. 9 words at the end of that line did all the damage. Not limited to the client. A physiotherapy department in the North put out a 2-paragraph statement about a patient it would not name. A pharmaceutical index dropped 11% before lunch, and nobody could explain to the presenters exactly why. Then everybody on Earth reached for the same door at the same time. Thursday was the buying. Every rig in every warehouse in every country sold out by the afternoon, and a second-hand helmet resold for more than a car. Worldfall took 400,000 signups an hour and then stopped taking them at all. And under all of that, quietly, the money went the wrong way. Coins have been getting more expensive for 4 weeks. 100 to the dollar at launch. 61 by the second day. 44 at the auction, 38 by the invasion, 31 on the morning of the siege. Thursday lunchtime it was 20, Thursday midnight 9. By Friday noon, $1 bought you 4 coins and a place in a line. 31, coins 1, 34, coins 1, tardy 1. That is when the bank stopped it. Currency exchange, suspended final rate, 4 coins 1, as 1 minus knowledge no further conversions, will be processed. 6 o'clock on Friday evening, and the window shut on every server at once. 3 regulators, 1 press conference, 1 sentence about consumer protection that nobody in the room believed. Accounts froze where they stood. Conversions in progress were reversed to the sender. A man who had wired his savings across at 4 in the afternoon got it back in dollars that no longer bought anything he wanted. Here is the whole thing in one picture. 26 days earlier, that same board had set 100 coins to the dollar, and one paralyzed man in a hospital bed had emptied everything he owned into it, while the rate was a joke and the currency was a toy. On Friday, the whole world tried to make the same trade in one afternoon and found a closed shutter with a number painted on it. He was not first by a clever margin. He was first by 26 days, and the door had been open the whole time, and nobody else had walked through it. 31 million coins sat in his account when the shutter came down. There was no longer a price on Earth that could put a coin into anybody else's. Bro, that is the head start. That is all it ever was. Friday night, everyone who owned a helmet was inside it. The starter meadows took 4 million people again, most of them logging in for the first time, half of them over 50. Nobody was farming. They stood in borrowed gear waiting for midnight, because a rumor had gone round that the update would be gentler on you if you were already in the world when it landed. It was not gentler. It was not anything. It was maintenance. AD Wars, Texa Burst. Worldfall, persistence update, live Texaburse, why am. Nothing happened in the streets. No monster came out of a screen. No wings opened over a city. Not one door anywhere in the real world had anything come through it. What happened was that 4 million bodies stopped being what they were on Friday. In a ward in the north, a 26-year-old who had been 8 weeks in a chair after a motorway crash was lying awake with a helmet on because the night staff had stopped arguing about it. His character was level 9. He had spent 2 weeks killing rats in a meadow for a total of nothing, and at midnight his legs came back with the rat's worth of strength in them, which is not much, and was enough. He pushed the chair away from the bed with his foot. It rolled 2 feet and hit the radiator. That sound, in some version, happened everywhere. Chairs went backwards in every time zone on Earth that night. Nobody stood up healed, because almost nobody had earned enough to be healed. They stood up a little. A grip that closed. A shoulder that took weight. 4 weeks of somebody else's grinding, arriving in a body that had been told it was finished. The hospitals were the first ones to work out what the update actually was, and they worked it out from the noise. Then, 41 minutes past midnight, the game did the other thing nobody had read the fine print on. Persistence audit. 00 sales and 41. 0 sales are in progress. Only 0 sales, account origin not verified. Not eligible items. Not acquired by this account. Not persisted purchase contracts. Void 0 sales, arrow sales and 41. It had been in the patch notes since Wednesday under a heading about account integrity, in the same voice that once called a man's spine physical feedback improvements. Poppy was live for the rollover with 3,100,000 people watching a loading bar. She read the 4 audit lines off her own screen at 20 to 1 in the morning in order, and then read the second one again. The forums decided within the hour that it was a bug. A clause that big could not be intended, it would be rolled back by Monday, somebody's brother worked there. 6,000 tickets went in overnight from accounts that had been bought and paid for. Nothing was rolled back. There was nothing to roll back to. Goldspire woke up on Saturday morning holding a list of things that had stopped being true. The account Crawford bought inside 8 hours of launch, at level 14, off a man who needed the money. Origin not verified. It cleared nothing. Everything on it stayed on it. The bought raid gear, the 31 expiring contracts, the crafting patterns, the shift crew who leveled it while he slept, all of it still there on the screen, all of it stopping at the glass. The 9,000 signed mercenaries had contracts that read void at W041 and men who read it at breakfast. The guild board still said what it had said for 2 weeks. Cycle board 1 Goldspire. Goldspire first on the server, and it now meant precisely as much as a trophy in a fire. And the 9 million coins on the head of the mongrel sat where they had sat since the day they were posted. Contract. The mongrel. 9,000 PS. Escrow. Held 0. Not paid, not refunded, not reachable by anybody alive. Money that was bought with money that was stolen from a dead couple bought nothing at all, which is the only sentence in this story the game wrote by itself. Crawford read the audit in a hotel suite with his cufflinks in. He read it twice, closed the tablet, and asked what time the cars were coming. No shouting. No phone thrown at a wall. He had only ever been in that game because his brother's money was sitting in it, and the thing he had actually spent a year building was 2 pages of paper in a folder downstairs with a line at the bottom for the bride's signature. The game failed. The paper had not. At 11 o'clock, a woman he had chosen for her surname was going to sign, and by lunchtime the company would be his. The ordinary way, the way it was always meant to be, in front of 100 witnesses and a registrar. He straightened his tie and went down to the cars. Spencer got up at 7 and had a bath, which took 11 minutes and needed nobody. The suit was gray and 2 years old and had been let out at the waist for a body that used to sit down all day. It hung wrong now. He had it taken in on the Thursday at the same shop, 2 floors under the woman who was taking in his sister's dress, and neither of them knew about the other. He put his own socks on. He did his own belt. His legs stood there and held him up the whole time like it was a thing legs do. He did not take much with him, no bag, no folder. The lawyer had everything and the agency had the rest. The mop handle went back behind the kitchen door where it had lived before it was a walking stick, and he stopped for a second with his hand on it, because 10 days ago 9 feet of carpet had cost him 4 minutes and 2 rests. Then he went out into the hall and took the chair off the coat hook's wall. He did not need it. That is exactly why it was coming. Every person in that room this morning knows one fact about Spencer, and it is a year old. He is the brother in the chair. He is why there is a ramp at the side and a space kept clear at the end of the second row. Being underestimated is an asset. It is the last one he has not spent, and it has about 1 hour of value left in it. So, the chair came with him. One more trip, carrying a man who could have carried it, which he then did. Getting that chair down 4 flights had taken 2 people every time for a year, and Haiti had been one of the 2 every time. He folded it, put it under one arm, went down the 4 flights in under a minute, set it on the paving by the dead fountain, and sat down in it. Whitaker's car was on the courtyard, and the window came down about 4 inches. The invoice chain was ready. Thursday had come and gone, and the agency had not been outside since. It had been inside a facilities company's billing records with a warrant. "We'll be at the venue, not for you." Then the window went up, and that was the entire conversation. There was a taxi booked for 8:30, the chair firm he had used all year, from the days when it took him to the clinic. He took the taxi. A man who suddenly stops needing his own bookings is a man somebody asks about. The hall was a gray stone place off the square with a registrar's brass plate and a florist van still unloading at 10:30. 9 steps up the front, a ramp round the side. He went round the side, because that is where the chair goes. The queue on the steps was half his sister's floor at work. 2 of them moved aside for him and one held the side door open, and not one of them looked at his face. Nobody ever does. They recognized the chair, they were kind to it, and they went back to their conversation. 10:55. 2 doors, shut, with a stripe of light between them, and a room on the other side where his brother was already standing at the front. A man sat in front of those doors with his hands resting on the wheels. 0 days. The doors opened at 2 minutes past 11, and the room did what rooms do. 100 chairs in 10 rows. A registrar's table at the front with the book already open and 2 pens laid across it. Half of Haiti's work floor on the left. Crawford's people on the right, in the good suits, checking their phones under the seats because the whole planet had woken up to a different one that morning. Every head turned for the noise of the wheels. Every head turned back. That is the entire trick, and it is free. A man came into a wedding in a wheelchair, and 100 people gave him exactly the amount of attention a wedding can spare. Somebody lifted a handbag out of the aisle for him. A man in the second row half stood to make room that did not need making, because the gap at the end of the second row had been kept clear since the invitations went out. There is always a gap kept clear. Nobody ever looks at what sits in it. He rolled into it, set the brakes, and put his hands on his knees. Haiti was at the front in a dress that had been taken in on the Thursday, in a shop 2 floors above the one that took in his suit. It fit her now. It had been made for a woman who had not spent a year lifting somebody. Crawford stood beside her with his cufflinks in and his hands loose, and he looked like a man at the end of a long, well-run project. The registrar welcomed everybody and began. It took 9 minutes. Names, dates, the 2 declarations, a cough at the back. Then the registrar turned the book around on the table, set 1 pen on the open page, and asked the couple to come and sign. Haiti took 1 step towards the table. Behind her, in the second row, a chair scraped. She turned around because everybody turned around, and she was the one facing the right way. Her brother was standing up, not braced on anything, not hauled up by an arm. He had put both hands on the wheels, pushed once, and come up out of that chair the way people come out of chairs, and then he simply stood there in a gray suit in the middle of a wedding, taller than she remembered, with his hands at his sides. Haiti had carried that chair down 4 flights with a neighbor. She had cut his food for 11 months and buttoned his shirts and slept in a room where she could hear the springs when he tried to turn over. She had learned, the way you learn a language, exactly how far a doorway had to open. She did not scream and she did not run at him. She stood in a dress that fit and she put 1 hand flat on the registrar's table because her legs had gone, and she looked at her brother across 4 rows of guests and did not say 1 word. The counter had stopped at 41 parts 3 days earlier, in a crater on the other side of a screen that nobody in that room had heard of. This was the first time anyone in his real life got to see what it bought. There were 61 phones in that room, and about 40 of them were already up. This was the first morning of the merged world, a company man marrying into a family name, and there were 3 press crews outside on the steps because the finance pages had been running the family's name all week. A guest on the bride's side had been streaming the whole ceremony to her group for a laugh. By the time the doors opened again, that stream was at 900,000 and climbing, and it was not the only one. The whole world was already watching this room. It just did not know why yet. That was the moment the side door opened and Whitaker's people came in. 4 of them, plus 2 uniforms who stayed at the back. No shouting, no drawn anything. They came up the side aisle in a line and stopped level with the front row, and the lead one said the only sentence anybody needed. Nobody signs anything. Then it was paperwork, out loud, in front of 100 witnesses, which is the worst place on earth for it. The man they had taken alive over Spencer's desk 11 days ago had given them a job code. The job code sat on 2 invoices from a security consultancy, $45,000 each, filed under site risk assessment and paid the month after the work. The consultancy billed a facilities company. The facilities company was owned by a holding company. 40% of that holding company belonged to the group Crawford had inherited, and his signature was on the ownership return. Crawford did not blink at any of it. He turned to the lawyer at the end of the front row, said something short and quiet, and the lawyer started talking about service of documents. A man who kills by paperwork is not frightened of paperwork. He had a route out of every line of it, and he was already walking it. Then Whitaker read out the next 2. A haulage subcontractor had taken $60,000 in 2 payments 13 months ago, in the fortnight either side of a motorway accident, from the same facilities company. The driver was in custody as of Thursday, and the road safety report on that accident had been amended 11 days after it was filed, by a hand nobody could account for, on the page that carried the brake data. The room went quiet in the wrong way. Haiti's colleagues had stopped filming and started listening. Crawford's lawyer put a hand on his sleeve. And Crawford, who had not looked away from the front of the room since the agents walked in, finally turned around to see what his bride was staring at. He saw a cripple standing up in the second row, watching him. That is the thing that broke him, not the invoices. He had lawyers for invoices. What he could not get through was a man he had put in a chair with his own money, on his own feet, in a suit, looking at him with no expression at all, while 100 people watched him do it. Spencer had heard the speech that came next once before. He had heard it lying down, on a floor, with a shoe on the side of his head, in a life that no longer existed anywhere except behind his eyes. This time it came at him standing, and it came in front of 61 phones. Crawford told him he had paid for the truck. He said it in the voice he used for board meetings, with the contempt underneath finally allowed out into the air, and then he said the rest of it. How he had killed their parents, the road, the year, the chair, the sister, the name on the company, and every clause of it landed on a registrar, 2 police officers, a national security officer holding a running recorder, 100 guests, 40 raised phones, and the woman he was there to marry. I paid for the truck. I paid for the road your parents died on. Look at you. You should have stayed on the floor. The lawyer stopped talking. There is nothing to say after that. There's only a transcript. Bro, that confession got told to a boot-shaped audience of 1 once, and it cost this man his whole first life to hear it again with the doors open. Haiti walked back to the table. She picked up the pen the registrar had laid out. She looked at it. Then she opened her handbag and took out a card. The one from the family office. The one that had moved the wedding forward for family reasons. The one that had lived behind the fruit bowl since the night it arrived. And she put the card down on the open page of the register, squarely, over the line where her name was supposed to go. She set the pen on top of it. Spencer. That was all she said, and she said it to her brother, not to the man beside her. Then the lawyer at the end of the front row, Spencer's lawyer, who had been sitting in a wedding all morning with a folder on his knees, stood up and handed her 1 page. Company shares, sold on the 1st of the month 4 weeks ago, by a man in a hospital bed who owned them, into a currency that no longer converted. There was nothing left in the family holding worth marrying for, and there had not been since the day before the game launched. She had spent a year being told she was the last thing keeping her brother safe. She had been the only person in the building he was protecting. They took Crawford out through the side door at 11:40. Nobody stood up for him. At 4 o'clock that afternoon, in a world where the game had stopped being only a game, the mongrel walked into Goldspire's guild hall. The hall sat on a cliff terrace above the Capitol, gold trim on every gatepost, 900 names on the roster. Those names had spent the morning reading contracts that came back void. Guild board. 1. Goldspire First members online. 6 aides. 11 logged in after lunch. 5 of them logged straight back out again. The gear in the guild vault was still there, and still stopped at the glass. Bought with money stolen off a dead couple, and nobody alive was being paid to die for a man in the back of a car. The 9 million coins on his head were still sitting where they had been posted, in a wallet the banks had welded shut. Contract. The mongrel, 9,000 people, escrow, frozen people. So, there was no fight. There was a barn-sized chimera coming up a cliff road, and there was a gate, and there were 6 players on a wall. 228 damage. Damage 5 before Sisek. It took 4 minutes. The gates came down, then the hall came down, and the terrace went into the valley after it. When it was finished, the thing that did it stood on the wreckage with its wings open, serpent banding, ogre plate, black quills, gill slits, drake head, 50 feet of gray membrane, nothing shed and nothing hidden, and every screen on every server printed the same glowing line under it. By Goldspire, Guildhall, destroyed parts absorbed, 41. Poppy was live for it with 4 million people watching. She did not say anything for 11 seconds. Haiti watched it on a phone, in a corridor outside a registrar's office, standing next to her brother. She had already worked out where the rig had come from and who had been alone in her spare bedroom every night for a month. She looked at the screen and then at him, and he nodded once, and neither of them said a word about it, because there were 2 police officers, 10 feet away, and a statement to give. 41 parts had bought him the 4 minutes on that cliff. The first one had bought him a finger. A truck hit him once, and it took his legs and a year and everything with his name on it. This time nothing hit anybody. He stood up in a room, and the paperwork did the rest, and the monster took the Guildhall in the open in front of 4 million witnesses, while its owner sat in the back of a car. Outside on the steps, the press were still filming the wrong door. 11 days to the first verdict. The first verdict came in 11 days, and after that they arrived like a counter. The road came first. The haulage driver pleaded to it in 20 minutes and gave the court 13 months of dates, phone records, and 2 payments he had never been able to explain to his wife. Then Crawford. 2 counts of murder for a mother and a father on a wet stretch of motorway. 1 count of conspiracy for the truck that took his brother's legs. 1 count of attempted murder for the man he sent up 4 flights of stairs on a Wednesday night. Fraud on the transfer of the company. Perjury on the ownership return with his own signature at the bottom of it. The security consultancy went down in its own trial 3 weeks later, 2 directors with it. The facilities company was wound up by order. Nobody defended the holding company at all. It was sold in a morning at a price nobody argued about. 29 years. To be served. He did not walk out of that building. On the last morning, his legs went from under him at the rail, and 2 officers took him under the arms and carried him, and the only exit in that courthouse that will take a man who cannot walk is the side door with the ramp on it. Spencer's wheelchair had been folded against the wall by that door for 11 days. He brought it every morning and never once sat in it. They carried Crawford out past it. The company came back in a room with 9 people in it and no press. 1 page, 1 line, 1 pen. Hattie had already refused to put her name on a line once that year, in front of 100 guests, with a card laid over it. This time she read the page twice, asked 1 question about staff contracts, and signed. Then her brother slid the rest of it across the table to her. The keys, the floor, the name on the door, the whole thing their parents had built and Crawford had spent 13 months laundering. She runs it now. He had a monster to run. The world took longer than the courts did. That autumn, the whole planet learned 1 rule and hated it. The merge pays what you earn, and nothing else. Physiotherapy departments started asking patients what level they were. A gym 2 streets over put a card in the window offering level 10 in 6 weeks. Cash up front, which is the oldest lie in the world wearing a new hat. A man could sit down in a rig with everything he owned and buy absolutely nothing, and a woman on a night shift could kill meadow rats for 2 weeks and get her left hand back. 4 million people in the starter fields, all of them healing at the speed of their own hours. The 26-year-old in the north made it out of the chair in February. It was slow, it was ugly, and it worked. Poppy stopped doing promo. She spent her nights filming other people's small returns instead. A grip, a step, a hand closing on a rail, and she had more viewers for that than she ever had for a boss fight. Whitaker's car was gone from the courtyard by the end of the first week of the trial. He left the file on the kitchen table on his way out, all 31 pages of it, with the last page taken out. Bro, this is the part I'd put on the wall. Spencer got up at 5 most mornings now, because he could. The persistence update never logs anything out. The mongrel stands in that world whether or not there is a man in a helmet, on a ridge road above the poison ridge, wings folded, waiting for someone to come up it. So, at 5 in the morning there were 2 of them at the same sunrise. He stood at the kitchen window 4 flights above the dead fountain, in a dressing gown, on his own feet, watching the light come up over the roof line. The rig sat on the desk under that window with the feed still running. On the screen beside him, the same gray light was coming up over a ridge road, on a barn-sized thing with its wings folded, facing the same way he was. 1 line under it, lit since a crater 3 days before a wedding. Parts, 41. One body, walking. On the last of those mornings, the screen had something in it that he had not put there. Out past the ridge, on ground no player had ever farmed, a gate stood open that had not been opened the night before. Nothing had built it. Nobody had bought it. Ass. Not a player structure. Something on the other side of it had noticed that the world was real now. He looked at it for a while. Then he put the kettle on because it was a Tuesday and there was a floor of staff expecting his sister at 9. He had spent 30 days counting down to a wedding. Now he counted the other way. Day 1.